Prologue. Kelsey. It was like a yeti had thrown up on everything. White walls, a white sofa, even white rose petals littered the coffee table. Furniture made of maple, every piece hand-carved and likely worth a small fortune. Sheer drapes hung from ivory rods set above a wall of windows. Everything was crisp, bright, white. Even at 8 in the morning there was no need for a lamp. Warm light glossed the room, a luminous sheen of magnificence and perfection coating every square inch. Staging homes came with a list of pros and cons. This house was the epitome of a pro. Glancing around, I didn't see much for me to do in the way of making it marketable. Hell, I could have made a mess, and it would probably still sell for more than the asking price. But I wasn't about to argue with the realtor. If she wanted to pay me to take down a few pictures here and there, hang a couple of pieces of art, and add some throw pillows and blankets, maybe a rug or two, then so be it. I certainly wouldn't turn my nose up at that. There was nothing like an easy project to start my day off right. However, that feeling quickly changed when I turned toward the built-in entertainment unit along the far wall. My eyes didn't settle on the ridiculously large TV in the center, or the tall crystal vases filled with twisted sticks of bamboo and pristine white silk flowers. Rather than focus on the polished knobs of the glass cabinets along the top, the ceramic seahorse on a shelf to the right, or even the snow globe of a white mountain top, my sight fell upon a picture frame that appeared to have been made out of small pieces of dried wood. Antique, maybe. Or possibly leftover logs from a fire, pale with charred accents that gave it an overall ash-gray color. But it wasn't the frame that made me pause. It was the photo inside. And as I stood in the middle of this exquisite room, surrounded by its beauty, wrapped in its brilliance, I couldn't help but feel cold. The emotions clawing their way up my throat were a stark contrast to everything around me. Red to the white, fury to the calm, chaos to the precision. The only word filling my head was con. Con, con, con. This had to be a joke. A horrible, painful, sadistic joke from the universe. Karma cashing in her rain check from a mistake I had never intended to make in the first place. There was no other explanation for how I had found myself in the middle of his house, staring at a photo of him and his wife. Her in a white wedding dress, him in a matching tux, his arm around her ridiculously tiny waist, her eyes set on his profile, a smile painted on his lying, smarmy, manipulative lips. Everything was white, the color of silence. How fitting. Slowly, calmly, I pivoted, turning my back on him the same way he'd done to me. My hands curled in on themselves at my sides to keep from destroying the facade he cowered behind. All I wanted to do was shatter his fraudulent existence, demolish the carefully crafted image of perfection he surrounded himself in. I'd wanted to do it years ago, when he had done those very same things to me. Crushed my dreams, destroyed my innocence, annihilated my heart. I had wanted him to feel the pain he'd left on my doorstep, but I never did. Doing so would have only wrecked my reputation and killed my character. But now I found myself filled with the same acrid urges, the same venomous desires as before, to expose him for the snake he was. Except, once again, doing so would ruin me. Instead of giving in to the resentment and desire for vengeance that had been resuscitated by his wedding photo, I pulled myself from my back pocket and dialed the only person who had ever been there for me. I'm starting to think you're more excited about my wedding than I am, she teased in lieu of a greeting. Seriously, Kels, we just got off the phone less than 5 minutes ago. Did you come up with another idea or something? Yeah. I craned my neck, glaring at the smug grin on his handsome face as it stared at me from behind a pane of glass. I'm getting a stripper for your bachelorette party, but not a cop. I'm thinking of a lawyer, or doctor, someone prestigious and rich. She snorted. I hate to break it to you, but I think those are only costumes. An act. I doubt they fight fires during the day and take their clothes off for cash at night. In fact, I'm fairly certain they don't. I huffed and moved out of the room, prepared to get this job over with so I could leave and, hopefully, never look back. That's not the point, Tatum. My best friend grew silent for a moment, her gentle sigh drifting through the line as if letting me down made her sad. Jay won't go for that. We both agreed that neither of us would have them at our parties. Somehow I managed to make my way into their room. I immediately took control of my gag reflex and headed back out, finding myself in a hallway. Again, Tater, you're missing the point. I highly doubt Jason would have a problem with a surgeon grinding on me in nothing but a banana hammock. Considering he's your cousin, you're probably right. I'm sure his issue is more about someone else grinding on me. You know, because we're getting married in 6 weeks. Plus, he's the only guy I ever want to see in a banana hammock. Not that he wears them. He doesn't, as far as I'm aware. And I don't want anyone else grinding on me. Only Jay. Is it weird for you to hear that? I never know if something will bother you or not, since he's your cousin and all. Tatum had always been a horrible liar, and even worse at trying to cover it up. Her sense of guilt led her to ramble. I stilled and focused on her end of the call. What are you doing over there, Tater? You seem busy. Oh, nothing. Just putting away laundry. Tatum doing laundry was the very definition of a red flag, a giant neon warning sign, a siren blaring in the dead of night. Jason's there, isn't he? When I heard her sigh again, I realized it wasn't some form of sadness over letting me down. I shivered. Bless all the things. Don't ever answer the phone again when he's doing whatever it is you guys are doing. I promise I won't ever be pissed at you for that. Call me back when you're done. After slipping my cell into my pocket, I got to work, boxing up any personal effects to help potential buyers imagine the house is theirs instead of someone else's. A picture of him smiling at her while she posed for the camera. Fake. Another of him kissing her with eyes closed. Fake. One of her tucked beneath his arm, a gentle happiness in his eyes. Fake, fake, fake. While I stored away their happy memories, I made a mental checklist of everything I planned to do to the stripper and all the ways he'd help me forget the existence of the cheating cop I'd once been tangled up with.
1. Aaron. Thumping music escaped the walls of the nightclub while I stood in the parking lot wondering why the hell I was here. I stared at my reflection in the door of my truck, unable to ignore the fact that while others staggered about in relaxed or skimpy clothes, I was in dress slacks and a pressed Oxford shirt, a silk tie knotted loosely around my neck. A sore thumb had a better chance of going unnoticed. "Oh my God, Aaron, what took you so long?" A flash of pink hair came into view in the shiny red paint of my truck. "I called you like an hour ago." I shifted to the side and quirked a brow at the Spitfire. Cheryl was just one of many who had turned down my romantic advances in favor of a friendship. In fact, standing outside of this club was just another way of reliving the nightmare that was my sex life. The problem with staying in a hometown was that no matter where you looked, memories, the good and the bad, were everywhere. I'd been shot down numerous times inside those doors, only to leave with my friends thinking I'd landed a score. I was living a lie, hiding behind the need to appear like a player. At least I could sleep well, knowing that if I didn't wake up, I'd have a chapel full of women mourning my death. Sadly, that thought didn't keep me warm at night. "Did you wear your watch in the shower again? You called me 30 minutes ago, and I told you then that I was still at the hospital. I had literally just finished dictating a report for a patient when you called." Pursing her glossy pink lips, she tightened my tie, nearly choking me before she was satisfied. "Where's that thing you people use to listen to hearts? And your science jacket, the white one, where's that? Why? Just get it, Aaron. Hurry. First, tell me why. When you called, you told me you needed my help. I came straight here from the hospital because you said it was urgent. Now you're fixing my tie and wanting me to put on my coat? At a club, no less? I'm not doing anything until you start talking. What the hell is so urgent, Cheryl? Has anyone ever told you how difficult you are when you're menstruating? She set her hands on her hips, reluctance dancing in her fluttering lashes. There's a bachelorette party going on in the VIP suite. They've asked about a doctor at least 100 times, and being the amazing friend that I am, I figured I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Give them what they want, and in turn, you get what you want. Sex. You're welcome. I held her shoulders, adding an impatient shake. Does someone need medical attention? No. She waved me off as if my question were ridiculous. They just keep asking if anyone has seen a sexy surgeon with, and I quote, an above-average tongue depressor. Well, if that didn't pique my curiosity. So get your coat and heartbeat checker and let's go. Heartbeat checker? You mean a stethoscope? I had to fight off the smirk that begged to curl the side of my mouth when she nodded. How many times do I have to remind you that I'm not a physician? I have my PhD, not a license to practice medicine. And your point is, you couldn't have borrowed one from a friend while you were at the hospital today? I'm sure there are a dime a dozen around that place. I dropped my chin to my chest and shook my head slowly. Laughter lifted my shoulders while hushed wisps of humor slipped past my lips. This was one of the reasons I'd been okay with keeping Cheryl as a friend instead of dismissing her after being rejected. Her amusement made it all worth it. Can you just put the coat on? For me? She batted her lashes. Please, Aaron. They dropped a ton of money on that suite, and the last thing I need is for their night to be ruined over something that's out of my control. Fine, I conceded and grabbed the last piece of my work attire, completely aware of what a bad idea this was. Sure, there was a chance I might get lucky tonight. But if my history with the entire female population had taught me anything, I knew better than to get my hopes up. Lead the way, princess. It wasn't like I had anything to lose, except my dignity and self-respect. Then again, I didn't have much of either one left. Case in point, I walked into a club on a Saturday night dressed like a medical professional making rounds in an emergency room. I could only imagine this was what it would feel like to show up to a Halloween party and discover that somewhere along the way there'd been a misunderstanding because no one else was in costume. Mortifying. That's what it was. Cheryl patted my back and winked, as if her encouragement would somehow eradicate my humiliation. It didn't. But at least it gave me something to think about during my stroll through the swaying crowd. A few people swung their attention my way, but after a quick, inquisitive stare, they returned to what they were doing, drinking or dancing. One was drinking and dancing, and if I weren't on my way somewhere, I would have stopped and watched how long it took before she ended up wearing that drink. My heart rate increased when I approached the rear corner draped in ambient lighting. The music pulsed through my veins as bodies swayed together. Rented booths lined the entire wall behind the dance floor. While the smaller sections I'd passed were a few feet above the main floor and only semi-private, this one sat high enough to boast a view of the entire place, and was enclosed by a wall of glass that offered total privacy. And that was what had me the most freaked out, considering I didn't even know who was up there. However, by the time I stepped inside and made my way beneath the blue fluorescent bulbs and black lights, I'd managed to get a grip on my nerves. Either I'd discovered my confidence, or adrenaline had flooded my veins, because my voice was full of conviction when I called out. I heard someone was asking for a doctor. Holy shit. I'd walked into the mother lode of sex appeal. 5 sets of eyes found me. 5 pairs of breasts practically spilled out of tight dresses and low-cut tops. But the best part was all 5 women appeared to be my age or less, One might have been slightly older, though I wouldn't turn her away if she showed any interest. Before I could assess each of them individually, a beautiful blonde ran toward me, squealing and bouncing on the balls of her feet, hands clapping wildly like she'd never seen a man before. The way she hopped and spun reminded me of a merry-go-round with fried electric cords. "Guys, the stripper's here," she shrieked, turning to the others in the room. Excited commotion broke out around me, yet I couldn't understand any of it. The only thought I had at the moment was that these ladies were under the impression that I was here to take my clothes off and dance at the same time. Yeah, this was a horrible idea. One Cheryl would pay dearly for. I attempted to slowly retreat out of the room, though I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. Luck was never on my side. I managed to take 2 steps before the animated blonde foiled my plan. She grabbed my arm and dragged me to the middle of the group, stopping. I wasn't sure if it was on purpose or if my feet had simply quit moving. In front of a tall goddess, I wouldn't mind worshiping with my lips. Just then, she bent at her knees and picked up something from the table next to her. Ducking her head to one side, she slipped a piece of sheer fabric over one shoulder before situating it across her chest. It read, "Bride-to-be." That should have been my cue to leave. Should have been. However, my dumbass ignored the alarm bells in favor of her pouty lips and smiling eyes. The way her gaze caught the blue lights above us as she held my stare sparked a fire within me. A fire I wasn't sure I had the strength to put out. Damn. He's one lucky guy. It was deep, barely a mumble, a thought spoken aloud. I hadn't meant to verbally offer my opinion of her. She belonged to someone else. However, she had heard it anyway. Her eyes brightened like 2 twinkling stars, mouth forming a rapturous arc. Her chest heaved with excited breaths, and I didn't doubt I'd find heat along her skin if I dared to touch her. I had to pretend none of that affected me as I stepped away, removing myself from her dangerous gravitational pull. Suddenly, the music from the club became nothing more than a muted thump through the walls. With a quick glance over my shoulder, I noticed someone had closed the glass partition at the top of the steps, offering us seclusion from the crowd on the other side. I'd been to Boots enough times to know that while I could see the people and lights through the privacy glass, no one could see in. I was also aware of the security cameras inside these booths, and the team who watched the feeds in the back room. Cheryl had given me the ins and outs of this place, and it made me feel like I had an advantage over everyone else. The attendant for the room came over with his hand out, palm up, expectation in his eyes. At first, I thought he might have been in search of a tip, but I didn't understand why he'd receive one before the night was over. Then he leaned forward and said, "If you have a playlist ready, I'll get it set up for you." It took only a second to figure out that he meant the playlist of songs I planned to dance to. That's when my skin began to flush, a heat wave washing over me until I felt damp in all the wrong places. Not that there were any right places to sweat, but I digress. Even though I wasn't a professional, these ladies believed I was, which meant I had to play the part and leave them convinced. So I slid my cell out of my pocket and began to browse through every available tune I could find until I had what I felt was a solid lineup of beats one might take one's clothes off to. I didn't have the faintest idea what kind of music was appropriate for this sort of thing, but with the limited amount of time I'd been given to find something, I went with a variety of favorites from the mid-90s. If someone had told me 20 years ago that I'd be in my early 30s, single and so desperate to make it to the second date without getting locked in the friend zone, I would have totally believed them. On the other hand, had they told me I'd be here, searching songs from the Space Jam soundtrack to strip for a group of horny females, I would have laughed. Just because my friends were under the impression that I was a natural Don Juan didn't mean I was. That had been my well-kept secret since high school. I passed my phone to the only other male in the room and waited for everyone to take their seats. The guest of honor took her place on the decorated throne while her friends piled onto the couch that sat opposite her. I prayed I could pull this off without ending up with 5 more women in this area who would never date me. Well, 4. The 5th was clearly already on that list. When I turned away from the bride-to-be, ready to start the show for the others, I was surprised to feel a gentle yet possessive grip on my shoulder, directing me back around. Once again, her magnetic grin stole my attention, as well as every last brain cell. Her sexy voice raked over me when she said, "You mind tonight, Doctor? Fill me up." I glanced over my shoulder at the ladies on the couch. Each of them turned and engaged with the one next to them as if I weren't there. They chatted it up like they were at a Starbucks, not a nightclub. The drinks in their hands might as well have been coffee. "Here." Her voice drew my attention until I settled my heated gaze on the temptress in front of me again. She had a shot glass in each hand, one held out in my direction. "You look like you might need something to take the edge off." I would need more than whatever was in this shooter, but this would have to do, for now. I took it from her and dropped my head back, filling my mouth with the harsh taste of tequila. It went down as smooth as pouring gasoline on a fire. After taking the empty glass from my fingers, she twisted around and set them both on a tray that covered a small table next to her chair. I was surprised to find the majority of them flipped upside down, drained of their contents, and a part of me worried she had consumed them all. But I didn't detect the slightest sway or stumble as she lowered herself onto her throne. So I filed that concern away and moved on. The sound of a train flooded the speakers. It's now or never, all or nothing. Fisting the lapels of my coat, I wedged myself between the bride's legs and began to shimmy the fabric off my shoulders, all while hoots and hollers resounded from behind me. My blood thumped wildly, hips swaying side to side with drunken encouragement of, "Take it all off, Doc," from her friends. However, even with the added commentary, her eyes remained on mine. I tried to keep up with the beat of the song, though it proved to be difficult with the way she continued to touch me. Well, that and the dollar bills that seemed to float down from the ceiling as they were thrown at me from behind. Even when I turned around and held myself over her lap, I couldn't concentrate enough to move fluidly. However, when she groaned in frustration, I was ready to call it quits. "You've got to be the world's worst stripper. No wonder you were so cheap." She'd somehow managed to insult me with a genuine smile and infectious giggle, which kept my confidence from splintering. "If you can do this better, then by all means, show me how it's done." To my surprise, she said, "My pleasure." She pushed herself to her feet and pressed her warm palm to my chest, adding a slightly forceful shove. With my ass in the plush chair, she stood over me, and I couldn't ignore the smug satisfaction written on her face. It was like she'd won, which was absurd considering I was the real winner. I wasn't sure if she'd heard me, so I tried again, a little louder this time. "You move like a professional. I bet you'd make a killing doing this as a career." She met my gaze, her eyes wide in disbelief. "Wait, that came out wrong. How exactly could telling me I should take my clothes off for a living come out right?" At least she still wore a hint of amusement on her perfect pout. "I'm not sure." I gripped her waist in an effort to move her off me, realizing the dangerous position we were in. It was wrong, and the alarm bells in my head grew louder, deeper, warning me of what might happen if I didn't put an end to this now. Yet my strength failed, my brain refusing to tell my limbs what to do. I needed to remove her from my lap, but instead I held her there. I should have pulled myself to my feet, but I remained in the chair. I was helpless, and so fucking stupid. I gently pushed her off my lap and then pulled myself to my feet. The weirdest part of it all was the way her friends applauded from the couch, as if rooting for her to cheat on her future husband. Honestly, it was sickening. It drove me to secure my pants as fast as my fingers would move, then my shirt. Forgetting my tie, unwilling to spend the time to locate it, I grabbed my coat off the floor and stepped away. Yet the sight of her kept me from leaving. Rejection danced across her face. The room wasn't well lit, and the lights used in the space weren't the kind that offered much in the way of visibility. But I understood that face. I saw it every morning in the mirror. I recognized those eyes, unable to connect, shining with false excitement and dwindling hope. I'm really sorry. I hope you enjoy the rest of your party, and good luck with everything. There was so much more I wanted to say, maybe even ask, but I didn't have the courage to stick around any longer. I was already a fraying thread, and if she gave me the slightest bit of reasoning for coming on to me while celebrating her upcoming union to someone else, I wasn't sure how much longer I'd last. I tried to offer a parting smile to the other ladies, though they seemed to be occupied by the drama of the situation. They exchanged quick glances as if confused why I'd put a stop to the evening. One appeared annoyed. So I reminded myself that these were not the women for me, not the ones capable of a relationship, and while I enjoyed the easiness of temporary satisfaction, I would have so much rather had more. And these ladies couldn't give me the more I sought. Unexpected emotions furrowed in my gut with each step I made away from the suite. They grew so intense that by the time I made it into the thick of the dance floor, sweaty bodies surrounding me on all sides, the demanding beats of the music were nothing more than vibrations that kept my feet moving through the crowd. I'd known this was a bad idea. I just hadn't been prepared for how bad. Or why. That was fast. Cheryl stopped me at the edge of the bar, but I couldn't shake out of my thoughts fast enough to hear what she'd said. With a perceptive smile, as if she'd known me longer than 5 months, she gripped my hand. Why are you leaving so fast? You knew why they were asking for a doctor, didn't you? I shook my head, recognizing the unapologetic truth in her eyes. So you sent me in there, aware that they were expecting a stripper, and you not once stopped to question how I'd feel about it? Loosen up, Aaron. If anyone could pull that off, it was you. And since you are a doctor, I figured it was fate or something. Come on. You're always complaining about not being able to get a girl. Well, I just led you to 5 of them. What's that saying about leading a horse to water? I shook my head, hating how I couldn't stay mad at her, no matter how ridiculous her antics could be. Yeah, but someone who's getting ready to walk down an aisle to another man isn't the kind of woman I'm looking for. There were others in the group. I didn't limit your options. To a certain extent, she was right. She hadn't told me to focus on the one with the smoking hot body. However, she was responsible for putting me in that position to begin with. Did you at least get a number or a name? Just one? Her first question reminded me that I'd left my phone with the attendant. And while she tossed out a few follow-up inquiries, I frantically contemplated various ways of getting it back without going myself. I gripped her small shoulders and gave her a little shake. Cheryl, listen to me. I left my phone up there. I gave it to the attendant who took it somewhere and hooked it up to the speakers. I forgot to get it back. I had my mind on other things. I need you to get it for me. Please. You're a mess. And here I thought I was handing you the golden ticket of lady love, and you can't even get that right. She rolled her bright eyes. Sit, drink a beer while I go fetch your belongings. Did you leave anything else up there I should be on the lookout for? Maybe your manhood, testosterone, anything? Ignoring her digs at my pathetic life, I took a seat at the bar and waited for her to hand me a cold beer. It wasn't that I wanted it or would even drink much of it, not after the shot of tequila upstairs. I used it more as a way to fit in with everyone else. After all, my attire made me stand out enough as it was. I didn't need to be that guy, the suspicious one who clearly didn't belong. A few minutes later, Cheryl came back, my tie dangling off her finger and a taunting smirk dripping from her lips. By the way, you totally could have gotten that yourself. There was no one up there. I took a quick glance around to see if I could spot any of the women from the party, but none of them stood out in the crowd. That was fast. Her deep belly giggle broke through the music that consumed the dance floor behind me. I didn't expect you to be the best stripper in the world, but I didn't imagine you'd clear out a room full of horny drunks. Maybe you're right. Maybe you are a lost cause. My intense stare was meant as a middle finger without actually raising one. It was pointless, though, because all she did was laugh that off, too. And the only thing that made her calm down was the cold bottle of beer I pushed toward her. This has been fun, Cheryl. Really informative. At least now I know not to come running when you tell me something's urgent. And if you ever say you need my assistance in anything, you can bank on the fact that you won't get it. But seriously, it's been fun. I nodded and left, leaving her standing next to the stool I'd vacated with obvious disinterest in her rolling eyes. At least I had an entertaining story to tell. There was something about being in a loud space for an extended period of time that made the quiet of the outdoors noticeable. When I'd arrived, I could hear the music clear out to my truck. Now, as I left the club, the air held almost no sound at all. Maybe that was why I heard it. I'd never know. A heavy sigh sliced through the deafening silence of the night. Unlike relief, this one felt weighted with sadness. Defeat. It might have been a sigh, but it sounded more like a gust of wind slamming into a window pane. Subtle, yet devastating. I lifted my sights and stopped dead in my tracks, finding the bride-to-be leaning against one of the pillars that decorated the front of the building. She had her arms crossed, her shoulder pressed against the brick. Closed off. But I couldn't ignore the way she stood there with her head dropped forward, attention glued to the sidewalk below her as if trying to blend in with her surroundings. There was a good chance she wanted to go unnoticed, remain invisible beneath the lights lining the fascia. However, it was impossible not to notice her, and there was no way in hell she'd ever be invisible. As I moved closer, her details became clearer. Beneath better lighting, unlike the blue hues inside, I could see more than just dark hair and eyes. I was able to notice the deep shade of red that veiled her face in long, loose curls. And when I came to a stop in front of her and she lifted her gaze to my face, I grew lost in the mixture of browns, greens, and golds that stared back at me. "Where are your friends?" I asked, glancing around, still not finding anyone even remotely familiar. "They decided to go to a real strip club." "You didn't want to go with them?" At first she shrugged, but then she released another sigh and rested the side of her head against the pillar. "I decided to go home. Call it a night and go to sleep so I can put this all behind me." My throat tightened as I contemplated the words to use, uncertainty nearly choking the life out of me. "Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I'm sure your fiancé would agree too." Wide eyes held mine. Then her pink pout tipped into a grin I could only describe as flirtatious. "Oh, I'm not engaged." I fingered the sash she still wore draped across her body, pinching the thin fabric while taking in the slow swells of her chest, as if each breath were a rolling wave on a creamy beach. "Then who's the bachelorette?" "My best friend." Her voice was so soft it reminded me of Marshmallow Puff, which didn't seem to fit what I'd seen of her tonight. If anything, I would have imagined her as more of a marshmallow over an open flame. Hot and dangerous, yet deliciously addictive and satisfying. "She just found out she's pregnant, so she had to cancel at the last minute. I guess she's been sick and really tired lately." I nodded with a hesitant step backward, still unsure of the situation and not wanting to get my hopes up. "Was this just practice for you? Or do you have experience being the guest of honor at a bachelorette party?" She glanced to the side, avoiding me. "Neither." I was desperate for her to lift her gaze so I could navigate the uncertainties better. Right now, I felt like a blind man feeling my way through a desert in search of a drop of water. She shrugged again and finally raised her chin to meet my stare. I guess a part of me wanted to know what it'd be like. I'll never get married, never want to, so in a way, this was the closest I'll ever get to experiencing it for myself. Then why not go to the strip club with your friends? Because... Waiting for her to continue, I held my breath so long my breath turned stale in my lungs. Yet she never did. Instead, she dropped her chin again, wine-colored curtains shielding her face while she hid in the shadows. I had pegged her for a confident woman. It was amazing how destructive a single insecurity could be. Listen, I don't know you, and you don't know me. If you think about it, I'm probably the safest person to open up to. I won't judge you, and even if I do, who cares? The chances of us running into each other again are slim to none. Wonderment shone back at me when she blinked up, and then a careful grin danced at the corners of her mouth. Like the idea of purging her secrets to a stranger had never crossed her mind, and now that it had, the promise of liberation excited her. I kinda ran into an ex a couple of weeks ago. Somehow I'd had a feeling this had to do with an old flame. No one has ever made me feel as worthless as he did when we broke up. Not only that, but he completely tainted the idea of marriage for me. So when my best friend couldn't make it tonight, I thought it would be fun to pretend. I used to love playing dress-up when I was little. I could be anyone I wanted. I guess the excitement of make-believe never went away, huh? She covered her mouth with her fingertips, but they did nothing to conceal the innocent smile or silence the soft rush of laughter that drifted past her lips. And what was it you were pretending tonight? In an instant, she dropped her reservations like a magician dropped his cape. Her cheeks heated, her grin spreading wider, and her eyes bored into mine with the kind of gratification you'd see on the face of an Olympic gold medalist. That he didn't leave me? That instead I chose to leave him for a sexy doctor who adored me, who looked at me like I was the only woman in the room? I wanted to feel like I won instead of the other way around. That I was on the verge of spending the rest of my life with a handsome, rich, successful surgeon or something. I just wanted to pretend that my heart hadn't been broken into such unsalvageable pieces that I'll never be capable of love again. Her pain furrowed in my chest until my ribs ached, threatening to shatter. And even though I should have been used to it by now, the idea that she wanted to pretend I was a surgeon splintered inside like shards of glass ripping me apart. At least it seemed we had one thing in common, the feeling of not being good enough. I wasn't sure what compelled me to slip my arms through the sleeves of my coat and drape my tie around my neck. It could have been the need to give her what she wanted, to be the doctor with eyes only for her. In some twisted way, I believed doing that for her would help me too. Or maybe I'd just gotten sick of never being seen. Fed up with always being told I wasn't a real doctor just because the letters following my name were PhD and not MD. Tired of the knee-jerk assumptions that I was a loser, all because I'd chosen to stay at my parents' house longer than most. Either way, the reason didn't matter once I stood in front of her, wearing the costume we both needed. The tips of my loafers to the toes of her blue heels. Her hooded gaze drew me closer until I had my hands on her hips. And the instant she wrapped her arms around my neck, my mouth claimed hers. I broke the kiss to catch my breath and asked, "How are you getting home?" "Uber. I think Amanda ordered it for me before they left." "Well, if it doesn't show up, I can drive you." I pulled a few inches away from her face, needing to read her reaction. "If you want, of course." "Why?" "Same reasons as you. To pretend. You don't want to get married, but you want to know what it would be like if you did. I want to settle down someday, but I haven't found anyone who can look past my job or living situation long enough to give me a chance. So it's a win-win for both of us. Under one condition." She waited until I nodded before adding, "No names. If we're going to play make-believe, then we can't ever see each other again." which means no introductions, no chance at being able to look the other person up. Okay. Deal. And anything we say in the heat of the moment while deep in our roles can't be taken seriously.
Chapter 2. Kelsey. Some said tequila made their clothes fall off. Me? Tequila made me feel like I'd been run over by a train. 84 times. But then again, I couldn't blame every ache and pain on alcohol. The soreness between my legs and pinch in my thighs had been caused by the stripper. But after the tequila had made my clothes fall off. So, in a way, Jose Cuervo was at fault for all the things that had happened last night. You okay? Tatum raised her dark brows, piercing me with those midnight eyes that made it impossible to see the pupils. They always freaked me out. Eyes shouldn't be that dark. You look rough. I cocked my head and quirked my top lip in that sarcastic, "You're so funny" way. But even that nearly made me fall over. Damn hangover-induced vertigo. Yeah. And in case you were wondering, you had a kick-ass bachelorette party. You're welcome. Language, Mom scolded from the patio through the open slider. Seriously? I narrowed my gaze on my best friend, who hadn't moved away from the counter while she chopped vegetables for the salad. Leaning closer and lowering my voice, I added, "You curse all the time and she never yells at you. Must be nice to be the golden child." Tatum threw her head back and laughed. Two things I physically couldn't do at the moment, thanks to this ridiculous hangover. No, I don't. Not here, at least. And I'm not the golden child. That's Jay. I just get the perks because I'm marrying him. I rolled my eyes and waved her off on my way to the bar, where I perched myself on a stool and dropped my forehead to the granite. Someone came to sit next to me, but since the world had finally quit spinning for a few minutes, I didn't want to see who it was. And once she began to talk, loudly, might I add, my question was answered. My sister Marlena. What the hell happened to you? It might have been the remaining tequila that still swam in my bloodstream, but she sounded like she had her lips right next to my ear, yelling as if we sat 20 feet apart. I sat up straight, a little too quickly, and stared at the open slider. Then I waited. And I waited. And when nothing happened, I held my hand out, gesturing to the space between us in the kitchen and my mom on the patio. Are you frickin' kidding me right now? What? Marlena asked, having no clue what I was talking about. Mom literally just yelled at me for my language, and then you come in here, say, hell, and she does nothing. Kelsey Peterson! Again, the stern warning came from outside. Marlena and Tatum must have found that hysterical, because they couldn't stop laughing. I halfway wondered if they'd ever come up for air with how red their faces turned. Finally, my sister cleared her throat and swiveled her stool to face me. Your voice carries. Mine doesn't. Whatever. You're louder than a stampede of monkeys. Not sure how that makes sense, but okay. My nose scrunched while I gave her the nastiest eat shit expression I could muster. It makes loads of sense. At least it does to me. Right now. Next time you have too much to drink, I'll make sure to tell you how little you make sense the following day. Oh, yeah, Tatum's bachelorette party. How was that? Marlena eyed Tatum over the bar and furrowed her brows. Why aren't you hungover? She didn't go. I cringed when Tatum glared at me, knowing I'd have to explain without giving away her secret. She, ate something bad for dinner and had to cancel at the last minute. It was too late to get our money back for any of it, so we just carried on without her. You totally should have come. From the looks of it, I'd say I'm glad I didn't. Really, though, how much did you drink? A shit ton. Young lady, Mom said from the doorway, her glare pinning me in place. How many times do I have to warn you about your language? Connor and Lizzie are here. I'm sure your sister and Nick wouldn't appreciate it if their young children went home saying ass and hell and shit. All the words literally vanished in that moment while I stared in awe at my mother. This was my life. I couldn't make this shit up. Noted. I swung my gaze to Marlena and scowled. A crap ton. Which should tell you just how much fun it was. But if it doesn't, let me tell you, it was a blast. We had drinks and music and a male stripper that we didn't have to share with anyone else. A stripper? Her brow arched perfectly, only adding a slight wrinkle to her forehead. She was a damn fool if she thought anyone believed that she didn't get regular Botox treatments. Gee, Kelsey, I don't know what to say. Am I supposed to be sad that I missed seeing a guy dance around in ass floss? Again, I turned toward the door, noticing that my mother was no longer there. Not only that, but she conveniently didn't hear Marlena's language. I found that odd, considering she wasn't the quietest person. I rolled my wrist, sweeping my hand close to her face. It wasn't floss. Testy straps? She just refused to give this up. Unfortunately, Tatum couldn't resist chiming in. Penis ribbon. Their laughter made my head throb, which only got worse the more they carried on. Marlena added, dick sling. Zucchini bikini. Having enough, I decided to throw in my own. Ball satchel. Somehow, some way, I'd pissed the heavens off, because they were hell-bent on making me suffer today. Just then my mom slid into the kitchen and asked, what's a ball satchel? I might want one of those. Sure thing, Mom. I'll get you one for Christmas. Not a hint of a smile shadowed my mouth. I was that good at resting my bitch face during a moment of dry humor. Any particular color? Or would you like to be surprised? Her bright smile almost had me breaking character. Surprise me! You got it. I shifted to face Tatum and waited until she lifted her gaze, catching me staring at her. Rather than aggravate my throbbing head even more by flicking my chin toward the hallway, I simply said, come, let's walk and talk for a moment. One of the things I loved most about Tatum was the way she followed without asking questions. It made pulling her aside so much easier than having to explain everything in front of half my family. She was like a well-trained service animal. Jason must have been pleased. So, I slept with the stripper, I admitted once the door closed behind me. Tatum turned away from me, and with her head cocked, chin slightly angled up, she observed the bedroom that, at one point in time, used to be mine. How come I've never been in this room before? It's really nice. I love what your mom did with the curtains. Did you not listen to anything I said? I have to be honest, Kels. I stopped after you said you slept with the stripper. Why? I have a feeling I won't be able to scrub the images from my brain with a wire brush through the ear, and with as weak as my stomach has been lately, thanks to the... She leaned closer and lowered her voice. Vomit-inducing fetus inside me? The last thing I want to do is puke all over this really nice room. There wasn't much I could do but blink dramatically at her. How we'd ever become friends to begin with would remain a mystery. We were nothing alike. Nothing. All right, that wasn't true. But still, I refused to admit to anyone how similar we were. No need to make myself look flighty. Fine, I'll skip the details. I just need my best friend right now. Sympathy softened her features as she lowered herself to the edge of the mattress, pulling me down with her. What happened? Are you okay? I'm sorry, Kelsey. I thought you just wanted to brag about getting laid. Oh, I did. It was amazing. I ignored her eye roll and continued as if she hadn't non-verbally dismissed me. But that doesn't negate the fact that he's a stripper. He takes his clothes off for a living, Tater. Who knows how many other women he's boned after a few dances? You used protection, right? Of course I did. My head bobbed from side to side slowly while I contemplated her question, not at all caring that I'd already answered. I think I did. I'm pretty sure he wore a condom. Pretty sure? I woke up with an empty wrapper stuck to my cheek. That's about all the proof I have. Do you not remember if he put it on or not? Her incredulous stare was almost too much to look at, so I dropped my gaze to the floor and shrugged. Kelsey, before you go all high and mighty on me, let me remind you that I was really drunk. The VIP suite had free liquor, and for the money I paid that place, I took full advantage of it. And I do remember stuff, just not that part. Her face scrunched, feigned disgust dripping from her lips. I'm afraid to ask what all you remember. The good parts, like the freaky things he did to me. He should become a gigolo. That's a male prostitute, right? I waved her off before she had a chance to answer. Regardless of what it's called, he was a god in the bedroom. That sounds amazing. Can I go now? He had all the right moves, knew all the right places to touch and lick and squeeze and smack. And yeah, this has been fun. At this point, I was enjoying this too much to stop. Oh, and don't get me started on the filth that came out of that man's mouth. No worries. I wasn't planning on it. My heavens, Tatum. He said things that made me blush. Impressive. You'll have to tell me about it sometime later. Or never. It had become slightly harder to keep a straight face, but I wasn't a quitter. I pressed on, avoiding eye contact, knowing one glance at her and I'd lose my composure. And his stamina. I shaped my lips into an O, cheeks hollow, and fanned myself. Holy shit. He could give the Energizer Bunny a run for its money. He just kept going and going and going. Yeah, I vaguely remember those commercials. Oh, and his body? Sweet baby Jesus, Tater. Words cannot describe his body. Good. Then we're done here. She stood, but I grabbed her wrist, preventing her from leaving. What? You just said there were no words to describe it, so why try? What's the point in sitting here while you attempt to tell me about something that defies language? It's a waste of time. A smile broke free on my lips. Seriously, Tatum, while all those things are true, I was just messing with you. But I do need you. I need you to tell me that I'm not a slut. You're not a slut. And mean it. Her head dropped back at the same time a groan filtered past her lips. She sank onto the mattress and threw herself back, arms stretched out above her. I do mean it, Kels. You're allowed to go out and have a good time. Thanks, bestie. You're awesome. World's greatest pep talker who ever lived. The sarcasm was thick. You know, you're mean when you're hungover. Giving up, I fell back onto the mattress next to Tatum and turned my head to look at her. We agreed we wouldn't share names, so I don't even know who he is. Would it change anything if you knew his name? Yeah. If I knew who he was, I'd hit him up for a repeat. He was amazing. I wasn't exaggerating about that. Then again, that could totally get out of hand. It might lead to me paying him to have sex instead of going to a gig. That's a line I won't cross. A thin line, slightly blurry, faint, but a line all the same. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath before setting her sights on me again. Then I guess it's a good thing you don't have his name. Anyway, how are his dance moves? Anything like Magic Mike? If Magic Mike had 2 left feet and were deaf, sure. I laughed and held my head to keep the drums inside my skull from getting worse. Oh my God, Tater. He had the guy play the worst music. I'm talking about crap that was before our time. You know that one song that goes like, that's the way, I like it, that kind of music. That's bad. She tried to keep a straight face, but lost after 2 seconds. I realize I don't have much experience with strippers or the music they dance to, but I can't imagine a professional taking their clothes off to the likes of Tootsie Roll, unless their act doubled as a comedy show. Is that what he was? A comedian? I wish I could say yes, but I can't. Tatum sat up and dropped her head into her hands, her shoulders jumping with the amusement that rolled through her. Now I wish I had been there to see it. You would have been entertained. I dragged myself up until we sat side by side. I don't know why you like that lamp. It's hideous. She pointed to the duck with a shade over its head and quirked a brow my way. It's so cute. How do you not like it? I bet it's a collector's item. Yeah, if you were a garbage collector. Tatum reached out and opened the top drawer, finding a leather-bound book inside. What's this? She fanned through the blank pages as though it were a new novel from the library. Looks like a journal no one ever used. A memory sparked in my mind, one I'd locked away years ago. I grabbed it out of her hands and opened to the very first page, checking the name that had been written in blue ink. Kelsey Peterson. My grandmother gave this to me when I was in high school. I forgot all about it. How did it end up in here? I shrugged and closed the book. Who knows? My mom probably found it when she cleaned out this room after I left. You gonna keep it? I held it up and said, why not? It's mine, after all. What are you going to do with it? Hell if I know. But I'm willing to bet it'll be amazing, whatever it is.
Chapter 3. Aaron. Jason stepped into the party bus, took one look at the two gleaming poles, and shook his head. I swear to you, Aaron, if you got a stripper, I'm gone. I playfully shoved his shoulder, pushing him farther into the bus. You weren't specific about that. The bus began to roll away from the curb, setting us off balance on our feet. Jason grabbed one of the poles to keep from falling on his ass and grimaced, as if he'd just contacted a disease from touching it. Warming it up for her? I joked. He flipped me off just as the bus darkened. In an instant, colorful strobe lights danced from the ceiling and added to the bright lamppost glow that crept in through the heavily tinted windows. Club music thumped through the speakers, filling the space with a steady beat, but not one we couldn't talk over. For a neuropsychologist, you're rather dumb. The grin stretching from ear to ear informed me that he wasn't serious. Then again, he was my best friend. I'd known him since high school, so there weren't many insults he could sling my way that would be taken seriously. I specifically told you that Tatum and I had agreed no strippers. Yeah, but that's rather ambiguous if you think about it. With a heavy plop, we sat across from each other. He stared for a moment, mouth agape, narrowed eyes set on me and sending listless questions my way. I didn't break eye contact once. It was a match to the death. I'd always been good at this game. Finally, he blinked and asked, "How so?" I leaned back, settling in with my hands clasped behind my head. Well, it's unclear if that also includes women who are already naked. If you think about it, she wouldn't be stripping, because she wouldn't have on any clothes. Jason didn't hesitate to stand, demanding the driver stop and pull over. I'm getting out. I'm just giving you a hard time. Sit back down, dumbass. Dumbass? Me? He grabbed the pole and whipped around, then realized what he had his hand on and yanked it back as though it had scorched his palm. Next to you, I'm a certified genius. The only thing saving your reputation is the extra years you put in for a fancy title. His smile gave him away. Meanwhile, mine stayed in check, even as I tossed around a few different ways to give him a hard time about his job. You sure are, Jason. Tell me, how's the landfill treating you? With a groan, he reclaimed his seat. I should have never looked you up when I moved back. Imagine how insanely boring your life would have been had you not. He pinned me with his doubtful stare. I'm serious, Aaron. If you have something stupid up your sleeve, tell me now. I held up 3 fingers. Scout's honor. Why do you do that? You were never a Boy Scout. Doesn't mean I can't have the same honor they do. You should understand that more than anyone. It took significant self-control to fight off my smirk when he tipped his head in question. Don't hate on others who can satisfy a woman. I rocked a chick's world last weekend, I boasted, excited to finally have someone to tell. Noelle, my assistant at the office, didn't seem to care much, but Jason, he'd care. Maybe. Oh yeah? Have you heard from her since? Okay, so he didn't care at all. No, but that's only because we agreed it would be that one night, and then we'd never see each other again. She didn't even tell me her name. I'm not sure that does much to prove your point. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. If you were that amazing, she would want to do it again and again. I should know. Tatum can't get enough of me. For your information, we set those rules before we left the club. He grinned in satisfaction. Ah, so you met this chick at a club. Was she drinking? Not the point. Whose idea was it to keep it anonymous and never see each other again? Hers, but again, that's not the point. And then after you rocked her world, as you say, did she change her mind about it only being one night? I glared at him, burning my feigned annoyance into his face. No, but in a good way. Before he had his arms stretched out along the back of the bench, I could tell he had something witty to say. His slow-forming smirk told me so. But I let him have his moment. After all, this back-and-forth ribbing was what had kept us friends for so long. In a weird way, it was the most genuine relationship I'd ever had with anyone, despite the fact that we had gone years without speaking while we each pursued a career. When it came to everyone else in my life, I was a fraud, even when I didn't mean to be. So you were the best she's ever had, yet she didn't want to see you again. I shrugged and played into his game. You're twisting the whole thing to make it sound bad. You see, what had happened was... I had to look at something other than his face before I lost my composure and laughed too soon. We had agreed ahead of time that we would be real and honest, not hold anything back. And we were able to do that because we didn't know each other. No matter how great the sex was, a repeat would never work out. Why not? Think about it. If you knew ahead of time that you'd never see someone again, you'd have no inhibitions, no reason to impress them. And on the flip side, you'd feel no need to lie to them. It's far easier to just tell them like it is without worry. His head bobbed as he listened to what I had to say, entertaining my deductive reasoning for the time being. That didn't mean he wouldn't come back at the end with some insult we'd both get a good laugh from, though. It was rather liberating. That didn't come close to describing my night with her. I didn't have to worry about never hearing from her again because I already knew I wouldn't. And she got to play out her fantasy, pretend I was whoever she wanted me to be, say whatever she wanted, all without any fear of judgment. That all makes tons of sense. Really, Aaron, I'm impressed with your logic behind this. I'm also wondering why you've never gone about sex with that mentality before. But what I'm most curious about is, how would you know if anything she said to you, such as saying you were the best she's ever had, was the truth? If she was pretending you were someone else, she might have faked that part too. Doubtful. I knocked her socks off. If she had a way to find me, she'd tell me herself. Did this all happen in the parking lot or something? I narrowed my stare for a moment before I realized what he'd asked. What? No, I took her back to her place. Jason couldn't hold back his laughter. He went from having an amused grin to head back, arm wrapped around his waist, halfway fallen over in a fit of hysterics. After a minute or two, he finally calmed enough to explain what he'd found so funny. You know where she lives? Yeah, so? He shook his head, amusement still rumbling from his chest. But you were supposed to keep it anonymous? How can you do that if there's nothing stopping you from knocking on her door? Hell, why haven't you done that? If the sex was so amazing, you should be beating down her door. I wouldn't admit just how many times I'd contemplated doing that very thing. Granted, I couldn't remember exactly where her apartment was, but it wasn't like I couldn't figure it out if I wanted. In truth, I did want to. But there would have been no point. At the end of the day, she was the same as all the others, believing for one reason or another that I was someone else. They heard doctor and assumed my days consisted of reaching inside someone's chest and saving their life with my bare hands while earning at least $500,000 a year. She didn't think that, though. No, she just thought I took my clothes off for money. I wasn't sure which was worse. Have you not listened to a word I said? The sex wouldn't be the same. It was so good because we didn't have things like rejection or judgment getting in the way. I was able to tie her up and call all the shots, take complete control. Whereas if I try doing that again, there's the worry that it won't be as good as the last time. Or maybe she was only that vocal because she'd had a few drinks, and the next time she'd be sober and quiet, making me question everything I did. It's always best to go out like Mikey, on top. Leave it as the best night of our lives and move on, always remembering the time that no other can compare to. The bus came to a stop in front of a house. Through the window, I could see a guy walking down the driveway, and I assumed that meant this conversation had ended, which I was perfectly fine with. Jason didn't need to know the extent of my pathetic sex life. He'd always assumed I had no problems getting laid, and I never felt the need to correct him. This thing is huge, Jason. The guy's eyes lit up as he took note of the interior on his way toward us at the back of the bus. How many people are we picking up? I thought you wanted to keep this low-key. I did. But this asshat over here, Jason pointed to me, doesn't understand the definition of low-key. We were actually just talking about his need to overcompensate for the smaller things in his life. A barking laugh ripped through my chest. It's called mirroring, not compensating. You don't have to lie to Nick, Aaron. It's okay. Just pretend you won't see him after tonight and be yourself. If he wasn't my best friend, I would have told him off. But since he was, I settled for giving him the middle finger. Shaking my head, I turned to the guy sitting next to Jason. So you're Marlena's husband? Man, do I feel bad for you. You have to be related to this dick, I said, pointing at Jason, who smiled proudly, as if being called a dick was a compliment. I'd gone to school with Marlena, but we'd lost touch after my graduation, and I hadn't seen much of her since Jason had moved back to town 8 months ago. She and Jason, being cousins who were only a year apart, used to be close, which meant I'd spent much of my high school career around her. The few times I'd been around Marlena recently, Nick hadn't been with her. Nick laughed, glancing at Jason for a second before swinging his attention to me. He's not all that bad. Although I won't lie, after everything my wife's sister had to say about him, I wasn't exactly welcoming when he first moved to town. But then I got to know him and realized he was a pretty good guy. The fact that tonight we were celebrating Jason's last days of freedom before he married Tatum was a miracle. Her best friend, who also happened to be Marlena's little sister, had brought more problems between them than they had on their own. I wasn't privy to all the details, only the ones he'd shared with me over a beer from time to time. But I knew enough to conclude Tatum's best friend had something against men in general. Speaking of Kelsey, Jason snapped his fingers and leaned forward. Tatum's old room is still empty. I'm sure Kelsey's the last person you'd want to live with, even for a few months until you get a house, but if worse comes to worse, I can always ask if she'd be okay with you staying there. Are you suggesting I live with your man-hating cousin? He shrugged and leaned back, the complete opposite reaction I would have expected from him. Why not? It beats you having to sign a lease on something and throw money away on rent, money you've been saving to buy something more permanent. And like you just pointed out, she hates all things attached to a penis, so I wouldn't have to worry about you making a move on her. If you did, I might have to report you to someone. I doubt it would be safe to have you treat people with mental conditions if you have one too. Yeah, that definitely wouldn't be safe. I took a second to contemplate his idea. It wasn't the best, but it would do in a pinch. Okay, fine. I have to be out of the house the weekend after your wedding. If I don't find anywhere to go by the end of the week, I'll let you know. That way, if she says no, I'll still have one more week to come up with something. I'll have Tatum ask. We'll have a better chance of her saying yes to her. I jerked my chin in thanks just as the bus stopped in front of another house. Jason wanted low-key, so I decided to give him that. I just refused to tell him what the plan was, because it was far more entertaining to watch him try to figure it out. But at the end of the night, after driving around town for hours, he'd realize I'd given him exactly what he wanted. A night with the guys, hanging out in a party bus with 2 coolers full of beer. It didn't take a brain surgeon to know what your best friend needed.
Chapter 4. Kelsey. I'd stared at the screen so long that the letters and numbers had turned into black blobs that didn't translate to anything I understood. Honestly, I had no idea what I was even looking at anymore, or why I continued to sit in front of the computer. It wasn't like I was doing anything. Did you find a sofa for the Huntington model? Brent caught my attention with his snapping fingers and flapping lips. That man never shut up. You've been looking online for like an hour, and I'm trying to get the inventory spreadsheet finalized. Turning my back to him, I frantically searched the top of my desk, then the drawer that held my pens. After finding what I was looking for, I spun in my chair and held it out. Here, I think you might need this. He took it from me and then promptly narrowed his very confused gaze on me. Why would I need your business card? Because I think you forgot who owns this company. Brent being Brent, the disgruntled asshole in the office, he mumbled under his breath and walked away. If he weren't such a hard worker and capable of lifting heavy furniture, he would have been fired years ago. Unfortunately, he saved me the additional payroll expense. It'd take 2 people to cover his job. Wow. Tatum dropped her purse on my desk, earning my attention. What was that? Assholes. She moved the keyboard aside and leaned against the edge, her disappointment thick between us. Just because you hate men doesn't mean you should treat everyone with a penis like shit. Oh, don't let that fool you. I rolled my wrist over my shoulder as if shooing someone away. I treat all my employees like that, regardless of which crotch accessory they have. I'm an equal opportunity employer. I think your company is by far your biggest accomplishment. I beamed, sitting up straighter, filled with pride. You think? Thanks, Tater. You're so welcome. The fact that you still have people willing to work for you is truly a remarkable achievement. This heifer better watch it. The last thing a bride should do is piss off her maid of honor. What do you want? Why did you come here? I don't have time for this. Why not? Brent asked, literally coming out of nowhere like an annoying genie who stole wishes instead of granting them. It's not like you're doing anything else around here. After glaring at him for a few moments, I rolled my seat back to my computer and furiously searched for the biggest, heaviest couch that man had ever seen. That'd show him. And I would have purchased one, too, had Tatum not removed my hand from the mouse. Back away from the keyboard. Nice and slow. She regarded me like an irrational toddler. A $12,000 couch is a bit much, don't you think? I mean, you make good money, but that's a lot to spend on a sofa that'll sit in a warehouse. Get to the point of your visit, Hash Brown. She rolled her eyes, though that didn't stop the smirk curling the corner of her mouth. She secretly loved it when I called her potato-related names. It made her feel special. She didn't have to admit it. Okay. So you know Jay's best friend, Aaron, right? I know of him. Why? You've met him before, haven't you? She was up to something. I could tell. Crossing my arms, I leaned back in my chair. Technically, but it's been years. What's with all the questions? All the questions? Kelsey. Her laughter gave her away. It was the dramatic giggle, head slightly tilted back, and hand waving through the air like she was some character in The Great Gatsby. Not that I'd seen it, but that wasn't the point. I asked, too. You make it sound like I've interrogated you. Fine, it was only 2, but there's a 3rd coming. Possibly more. Whatever. You know him, though, don't you? He's the best man in our wedding. You're going to have to walk up and down the aisle with him. Jay went to high school with him, and apparently he used to hang out with Marlena, too. Thanks for that refresher course on Aaron. Unfortunately, I wasn't taking notes, so I hope there won't be a quiz. I lifted one brow in a silent challenge for her to get on with it or give up. I wasn't in the mood to play guessing games. "You're mighty snappy today," she said, squinting as though she were examining me. "Are you on your period?" "No. I get that in 2 days." "Remind me to stay away from you for the next week." Taking a deep breath, she readied herself to finally get to her purpose for coming. "Anyway, he needs a place to stay for a couple of months." "Nope, sorry. No vacancy." I slapped my hand on the top of my desk and carried on as if I were too busy to finish the conversation. All I was missing was a see-through green visor, and I could have passed as a hard-working stock market broker. "You have the spare room just sitting empty." "It's not empty. It's full of your old furniture." "Perfect. See? It's all set up for him to stay there until he can find his own place." "What about nope? Do you not understand? The no or the huh? And I use that room." "Oh, yeah? For what?" She should have known not to challenge me. I always won. "It's where I keep my Tatum shrine." "Fine, but can you at least consider it? Please? For me?" Damn all the things. I hated it when she asked me to do something for her, knowing I couldn't tell her no. "Okay, I'll consider it, but only under one condition." A full, heavy sigh rushed past her lips. "What's the condition?" "You let me name your baby." "No." Well, that was fast. "Not for considering letting someone move into your spare room for a couple of months." "Then, if I agree, you'll let me name it." "Again?" "No." "It must not be that important to you." She stared at me for a full minute, the seconds long and dragged out. "Why do you want to name the baby so badly? What's going through your head, Kels? Like, what kind of name are you thinking of?" It couldn't have been that easy. "I don't really care what you call the Bambino, to be honest with you. I just know you won't agree to it, which gets me out of allowing Jason's friend to live with me." "Why are you so opposed to it? He's a really nice guy, smart and funny." Whoa! I sat forward and held a hand up to silence her. "Are you trying to find him a place to stay or a wife? I'm not interested in either. And I'm really not interested in dating the guy." "Good, because I'm not trying to hook you two up. I'm simply pointing out what a great roommate he could be for a few months." "Few? You said a couple last time. What's it going to be next? A year?" She laughed, though I didn't know what was funny. "He's looking to buy a house, so he doesn't want to sign a lease. And the house he's in right now has sold. He only needs somewhere to sleep until he can get his own place. You have a spare room, and you have an inn with most of the realtors in the area. He'd pay you, obviously. He's not looking for free room and board. And from what I know of the guy, he's not a slob." "Well, that's comforting. After living with you, I don't think I could handle another slob." The smile vanished, yet I could see through her phony aggravation. I huffed, and my shoulders fell forward. "Tatum, I don't know how I feel about a guy living with me. I get that he's my cousin's best friend, and that I kinda sorta knew him years and years ago, so he's not entirely a stranger. But he's a man, nonetheless." Regardless of how I felt about the situation, Aaron didn't deserve to hang in limbo just because I hesitated to have a man move in. It wasn't fair to him, and technically, he wasn't the reason I believed all men were liars with shady ulterior motives. Yet, for whatever reason, I blamed the entire male population anyway. It was just easier that way. The list of their useful qualities was short, and roommate wasn't on it. "Can you just tell me why it's so important that I let him move in?" She was quiet for a moment, which was unlike her. Normally she talked, or rambled, and half of what she said never made any sense. But then she cleared her throat, which was a good indication that she was about to get real with me. "I feel bad for him, Kels. You also feel bad for the old dogs at the shelter who never get picked because they aren't puppies. Do you want me to house them too? What about the kids on that commercial who could eat for only pennies a day? I should move them all in?" "That's not what I mean." Feisty Tatum was on the verge of sneaking in. This ought to be good. He's a psychologist, owns his own practice, and has spent the last however many years taking care of others. And now he needs a place to stay just long enough to find and buy a house, and no one's willing to help. I lasered my narrow gaze on her. You have a spare room, and I'm pregnant. Not news we really care for others to learn just yet. Having someone live with us makes that a rather difficult feat, don't you think? Not to mention, we'll be newlyweds. If worse comes to worse and you say no, then I guess we'll offer him the extra room. But we were kind of hoping it wouldn't come to that. If you don't want him living with you, then why should I? A groan ripped through her throat that sounded far more like a growl than anything I'd ever heard come from her. I just explained why him living with us wasn't ideal. It has nothing to do with him, per se, and everything to do with the timing and our situation. Damn, Tatum. I was just giving you a hard time. I know. She didn't, but I'd let her pretend she could fool me. Okay, fine, I conceded. I'll consider it. But that doesn't mean I'll say yes. She beamed and pushed off the desk. That's all I'm asking for. When do you need an answer? Pulling her purse strap up her shoulder, she twisted her lips and thought. He has to move out in a little over 2 weeks, the weekend after the wedding, so the sooner the better, especially if the answer's no. He'll need time to figure something out. I nodded, more like my head bobbed while I became lost down the rabbit hole of concerns and what-ifs. I'll let you know either way by tomorrow. Is that doable? Yes, ma'am. She stepped away with a smile so wide I wondered if her face would split in half. Thank you, Kels. I didn't say yes, I called after her, but she was halfway out the door, so she might not have heard.
Chapter 5. Aaron. Morning, boss? Noelle beamed at me from her desk when I walked into the office. No matter what day of the week it was or what our schedule looked like, she always wore an infectious smile and spoke with such cheerfulness, as if those two things had been part of her job description. They weren't, but if she ever left my practice, I sure as hell planned to make them mandatory. Truth be told, I prayed she'd never leave. I doubted I'd ever find another receptionist capable of filling her shoes. Thinking of that, I glanced down and took note of how small her feet were. Then I shook off the irony. Whatever's in your coffee, I would like some in mine. Having a bad day already? She finished getting her desk set up, computer turned on, schedule open, files set out, and then moved to the waiting area to open the blinds and organize the magazines. What was it? Overslept? Stubbed your toe getting out of bed? Hot water not working? I collapsed into a seat and watched as she ran through her morning setup procedures, not bothering to help. Granted, that was because she didn't want it. A man could be told only so many times that he was in the way before he gave up. If she chose to handle everything on her own, then so be it. Yet another reason I prayed she'd never leave. It's Friday, I grumbled. Isn't that reason enough to be in a bad mood? Noelle stopped what she was doing and placed her hand on her cocked hip, regarding me with quirked, pursed lips the color of strawberry starbursts. I always thought the end of the week is when everyone's in a good mood. Last day before the weekend and all. Mondays are usually the moody ones. Maybe. But looking forward to time passing doesn't help me much. It stresses me out instead of exciting me. Next weekend is Jason's wedding, and then I'll only have one more week before I have to move out. It had been almost 2 weeks since my wild night with the faux bachelorette. Remembering the way her body felt against mine was the only thing keeping me somewhat sane these days. She offered a small smile while checking the water station along the far wall of the waiting room. You still haven't found anywhere to stay? One thing my parents always nagged me about was my extreme level of procrastination when it came to things I didn't want to accept. And this time, it had really bitten me in the ass. I think so, but I haven't heard back yet. Jason said he'd ask his cousin. Hopefully he'll give me an answer sometime today. If that doesn't work out, I'm officially screwed. I I closed my eyes and ran my hands over my face, not caring if I messed up my hair as I pushed my fingers through the overgrown strands. And there's no place that offers month to month instead of signing a lease? I found one, but as of right now, they don't have any available units. And once they get notice of a tenant leaving, it'll still be 30 days before I can get in. So that's not even an option. Wow, I so don't envy you right now. I groaned as she strolled back to her computer and sat, continuing our conversation while staying on track with her morning routine. Perching myself on the corner of her desk, I entertained her while she worked on organizing the patient charts for the day. In all seriousness, what will happen if his cousin says no? I guess I'll have to stay here. It's not ideal, but if worse comes to worse, sleeping on the floor and bathing in the sink will be my only choice. At least I won't have to live out of my car. I'd joked about it ever since finding out that my parents had sold their house and I needed to find somewhere to go. But the closer I got to the deadline, the less I found it funny. It was more or less my reality, and it was about time I started to accept it. Her sad eyes met mine, the sympathetic stare only making my day worse. I don't understand why Jason can't let you stay with him. Obviously, he wouldn't be the first option, but I can't imagine he'd let you sleep on your office floor. I doubt they'd want anyone living with them a week after they get married, regardless of how temporary it would be. But on the other hand, if I don't have anywhere to go and have to resort to living in my office, I'm sure he'd offer his place. I just don't want it to get to that point. I know I wouldn't want another man moving in with me and my wife as soon as we get back from our honeymoon. Well, hopefully you'll get good news about his cousin's place. I nodded and slipped off the corner of her desk, leaving her to finish setting up the office. Honestly, I was surprised no one had come in yet. We usually had at least one person sitting in the waiting room as soon as we opened. I checked my phone after my last patient and noticed a text from Jason. It was exactly what I needed to boost my mood for the day and ease the stress that had been eating at me for weeks. Kelsey had agreed to let me stay at her place. His message said there were conditions, but I didn't care what they were. It kept me from sleeping under my desk and cleaning myself in a sink that many others used on a daily basis. Noelle peeked her head into my office and paused, assessing me with curious eyes and a hint of a smile. There was no way she knew about my text, other than some odd intuition she seemed to have when it came to me. She always joked that we'd been siblings in a past life, possibly twins, and if I actually believed in multiple lives, I would agree. Jason heard back from his cousin. Her grin widened, excitement brightening her entire face. Based on your expression, I'm going to assume it's good news. I bet you're relieved. She entered my office and took a seat across from me. So, have you met him before? It took me a second to figure out she wasn't referring to Jason, because that would make no sense. His cousin's a girl. I used to see her around years ago, back when we were in high school, and she'd bug the ever-loving fuck out of Jason and Marlena. But other than that, no. I haven't seen her since I graduated high school and Jason left to go to college. How old is she? Skepticism rolled off Noelle like a ball on a downward hill. I had to stop and think about it, do a little mental calculation. She's Tatum's age, so mid-20s, I think, 25 or 26, I'm not sure exactly, just that she's quite a bit younger than Jason and me. She was only a kid the last time I saw her. Well, is she nice at least? Couldn't tell you, to be honest with you. I shrugged and began to tidy up my desk, preparing to leave for the weekend. I hear she has issues with men, but I'm hoping that it'll be different with me. I'm not looking to date her. She pinned me with a stare that promised lectures. Is she pretty? Hell if I know. Like I said, Noelle, it's been years since I last saw her. And back then she was awkward. She had frizzy red hair, braces, and glasses, and we called her Inspector Gadget because her arms and legs were long and super skinny. I doubt she's changed much, though. Her eyes rolled with her head, her shoulders slumping forward in a dramatic display of frustration. Seriously? If you think I'm gonna fall for that, you have another thing coming. Of course she's changed. She's not a little kid anymore. I didn't have to hear her say it to know what she was getting at. She believed I wasn't capable of making smart decisions around pretty women. Even more, she likely figured living with one would be a terrible idea. I couldn't argue, but at this point I didn't have much of an option either. You don't have anything to worry about. I highly doubt I'll find her attractive. Does she have Facebook, Instagram, any kind of social media we can find her on and see what she looks like now? I blinked at her, wondering how we could get along as well as we did when there were times I felt like several generations existed between us. What is this, 20 questions? You know I don't use any of that shit. College really messed you up, didn't it? She laughed to herself while pulling out her phone. If anyone spoke to you before making the decision to go for their doctorate, they'd never go beyond their master's degree. What's that supposed to mean? Listen, I didn't know you before you started college, so I can't say whether or not you've always been this way. But from the things you've told me, I imagine you entered freshman year as a normal 18-year-old and came out of graduate school as a 70-year-old. She waved off my confusion with a quick flick of her wrist, turning her attention to the device in her hand. You only have social media because of your practice, and you have me managing it. Name one guy in his 30s aside from you who doesn't have at least one social media account. I can name a lot. It's just not a wise way to spend my time. Actually, I couldn't name any. However, that had nothing to do with being the only one my age who didn't feel the need to share my every thought and meal with the world. It had to do with my lack of friends. My circle was small, and I liked it that way. Acquaintances were plentiful. Close friends were a select few. Okay, so what's her name? I leaned back in my chair, making it recline with my weight, and hesitantly gave her the information she sought. Kelsey. I'm assuming her last name is Peterson because that's what her sister's last name was back in high school, but to be honest, I don't have the slightest clue if they even have the same dad. So there's a possibility that... Found her. Damn, she was good. That was the reason I'd given all social media duties to her instead of trying to stumble through it myself. Wow. She's not at all what you described. I was about to ask what she meant by that when she turned the screen around and stopped my world from spinning with one picture. One face. I didn't need to see the other photos on her profile because I had every inch of her body etched into my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see her clearly. Just keep to yourself when you're both home. I'm sure it won't be hard to resist your best friend's cousin, especially if you say she's a man-hater. Don't sleep with her and you'll be fine. Too late. I hadn't meant to say it out loud, but I was in such shock I couldn't help it. Noelle lowered her phone and leaned forward, concern lining her brow. What do you mean, it's too late? I thought you haven't seen her in years. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, hoping it would clear away the disaster that had become my reality. Unfortunately, when I opened them again, I realized I wasn't lucky enough for it to have been a dream. My luck had to be the worst that had ever existed. Do you remember me telling you about that girl from a couple weeks ago? The one I met at the club and took home? The one who thought you were a stripper? Realization flashed across her face, dropping her mouth into an elongated O. Seriously, Aaron? That was her? How the hell did you not know that? My defensiveness peaked until I sat forward with my palms flat on my desk. How would I have? I couldn't have possibly guessed she'd go from awkward to fucking hot as hell in 13 years. It's not like Jason keeps family portraits in his living room for me to see when I go over there. And he sure as hell doesn't keep her photo in his wallet. She glanced at the screen in her hand and sighed. Well, what are you gonna do? What can I do? Just then a thought came to me. Shit. Noelle. I have to see her next weekend at the wedding. She's the maid of honor. I have to walk down the aisle with her. I think I'm missing something here. Didn't you say it was a bachelorette party? Which would mean your friend's fiancé would have been there, right? She told me her friend couldn't make it to her own party because... Gray clouds settled over me at the same time the sky parted. Truth shining down like rays of summer sun. All the scattered pieces finally piled together. I looked up at Noelle, eyes wide. Tatum's pregnant. That means... Oh my God. She gasped and covered her lips with her fingers. Is it not your friend's baby? I truly had no idea why she'd jumped to that conclusion. What? No. Oh. Well, I figured with all the other bombshells you've dropped, that was the most logical. Why else wouldn't you know about your best friend having a baby? I stopped to think about it. Maybe he doesn't know. Or maybe he just hasn't told anyone. Although if that were the case, I don't see why the girls would have known about it. It doesn't matter, Noelle. Whatever the reason, I highly doubt it's because it's not his baby. She rolled her eyes and waved me off, clearly ready to move on with this conversation, while I was ready for it to be over. Okay, so back to what you're going to do. You can't move in with her. Seeing her at the wedding will be bad enough. The wedding. Shit. Her words slammed into my chest. She was right. The thought of seeing her, Kelsey, day in and day out, knowing how she tasted, how good she felt, it was the worst idea ever. Panic gripped the back of my neck. I think you should let me stay with you for a few months. She laughed, rolling her eyes. You want to move into my one-bedroom apartment with me and my husband? And sleep where? The couch? You won't even realize I'm there. Right. Her grin stretched so far it made her eyes squint. No. Fine. I guess I'll just have to sleep here. But that means I'll be adding more to your morning routine. You may have to start coming in earlier to get it all done. I can't afford for a patient to find a pube in the sink from where I cleaned myself. You're disgusting, she teased. I'm sure you'll find a solution over the weekend. If not, at least you won't have to worry about this girl wanting anything to do with you. Aside from what you said about her having a chip on her shoulder when it comes to men, I doubt she'll want anything from you after the first time you asked her to clean up your pubic hair. You never know. I rocked her world 2 weeks ago, so there's a good chance she'll be able to look past my flaws. If you say so. She stood and headed for the door. Why doesn't anyone believe me when I say that? She stopped at the door, held onto the frame, and arched one brow. When you say what? That you rocked her world? Because we hear it every time you get laid. I couldn't argue with that. Granted, most of the time I said that because it sounded better than the truth, that I didn't get laid at all. It was like the real-life version of crying wolf. I wondered how that folk tale would work out for me. From what I recalled of the story, the boy had been eaten by the wolf because no one believed him. No one believed me when I said I had satisfied a woman more than anyone ever had before me. So then, what would my equivalent be to being eaten by a wild animal? Considering my luck, something awful.
Chapter 6. Kelsey. What is so important that you made me run all the way over here? Tatum waltzed in as if she'd never left, speaking as soon as the door was open and then flinging it closed behind her. There were times I had to remind myself that we no longer lived together, but then there were other moments when her absence could be felt deep in my marrow, such as evenings when I had to cook my own meals. Having a chef as a roommate had spoiled me rotten, or when I needed my best friend's advice and had to go farther than a bedroom to get it. Other things reminded me of her absence, too, like not having to empty the dryer of her clothes before putting mine in. Although, over the last month or so, she'd been here frequently as we planned her wedding. It was nice having her around again. It'd be a lie if I said I hadn't contemplated ways to get between her and my cousin, just so she'd come back. Don't act like you have such a busy life. I slouched in my seat at the kitchen table in a vain effort to look less unsettled. You write recipes, ones you make up. Just leave a stack of note cards next to the toilet and jot down ideas while you're crapping. It's called multitasking. Then you won't be so irritable when your best friend calls you over in the middle of a crisis. She plopped onto the chair next to me, completely unimpressed with my dramatic performance. You're right, Kels. I don't have anything else going on other than writing cookbooks. I don't have a wedding in 4 days, a rehearsal dinner in 3, or a pregnancy I'm trying to keep everyone from finding out about. It's a full-time job keeping your aunt from sniffing it out. Oh, and don't forget all the cleaning I have to do at the house on a daily basis. I slapped my palm on the tabletop and lowered my forehead as laughter rolled through me. You clean. Don't lie, Tater. This is me you're talking to. I'm not lying. I clean. Every day before Jay comes home from work, I rush around the house and put everything away so he doesn't realize what a slob I am and call off the wedding. I reached for her hand, leveling with her. I hate to break it to you, Tater, but he's fully aware you're a slob. Maybe you should learn to pick up after yourself to begin with rather than wait until the last minute and do it all at once. And when will you learn that lying doesn't get you anywhere? I pointed to her stomach, indicating the baby she hadn't told anyone other than me about. It's not lying when one simply omits the information from conversation. If anyone asks, I'll tell the truth. I just don't see the point in volunteering that information. Tatum had her reasons for holding on to this secret, and I couldn't fault her for them. The last thing she wanted was for anyone to believe they were only marrying because of the baby. As soon as Jason had a ring on her finger, the planning had begun, and to everyone's surprise, a date had been set for exactly 7 weeks later. She knew people would assume the rush to get married was due to her pregnancy, which wasn't the case, so she'd decided to keep a lid on it until after the ceremony. I understood her worry, which was why I'd gone along with it, going so far as to tell her friends that she'd bailed on her own bachelorette party because she had diarrhea and couldn't get off the toilet. She wasn't happy about that when she found out. I sighed with added effort. Fine. It's a half-lie, then. I prefer to call it a half-truth, but that's probably because I'm the optimistic one. For someone who's so busy, you sure do waste a lot of time yapping about how wonderful you are. If you add a little humility to that optimism, you might find yourself with extra time on your hands. Time that could be better spent learning how to iron. I'd never met another person who chose their outfits based on what was the least wrinkled. Tatum dropped her head back and let out an exaggerated huff, and just when I thought she'd toss back some off-the-wall retort, she pulled herself to her feet and moved to the kitchen. Without saying anything, she opened the oven and peeked in. Then she closed it before scouring the counters with confusion narrowing her gaze. What are you doing? Please say you're going to make me something to eat. Turning her bewildered expression to me, she said, You wanted me to look at something, so I thought you meant you ruined breakfast. I'll have you know that since you've been gone, I have yet to burn or ruin anything before sunset. My breakfast record is perfect. I take it this means you don't eat before nightfall? She wore her smile across her entire face, red lips curled deep, dark eyes bright with humor, and cheeks tinged pink. I don't think I like this new pregnant version of you. You're rude. I didn't have to bother smiling for her to recognize my humor. She knew me, probably better than anyone. I stood from my seat and pointed at the closed door to my left. I need you to look at something in there. Does it have 8 legs? The mere thought of a spider in my bedroom made me gag, my skin crawling as if those foul insects covered me. Hell no! I wouldn't waste my time having you come all the way over here for that. It would have gotten away before you showed up. There's no need to act like such a badass around me, Kels. Damn her for knowing me so well. I've lived with you, don't forget. I specifically recall having to rip your phone out of your hands to keep you from calling the fire department over a daddy longlegs in your shower. Oh, you must have misunderstood. I didn't say I would have handled one of those demonic creatures myself. I just wouldn't have called you for help. It'd be far quicker to light a match and burn the place down. You're ridiculous. Her lashes fluttered with an easy breath of humor escaping her smiling lips. What is it you want me to look at? Just come see. She stopped me with a hand against my shoulder. I'm sure I don't need to state this, but I'm going to anyway. If it's an area that's typically covered by panties, you'll need to call a doctor for that. I love you, but it's not on me. It's in my bathroom. I opened my bedroom door and walked in, not giving Tatum a chance to make another comment about seeing my secret garden. She followed me into the bathroom, where I pointed to a wad of toilet paper that sat on the edge of the sink. Long seconds dragged on as she stared at it, then at me, silently questioning me with wary eyes. Just look at it and tell me what it is, please. Again, Tatum glanced between it and me, then said, if you're asking whether it's Charmin or quilted northern, I don't have the slightest clue. Did baby brain already kick in? No, it's inside the toilet paper. Tatum reluctantly took a step forward and pinched the edges of the material the way one would pick up a dirty sock. But once she realized there was something inside, well, something different than she expected, she grabbed it, then dropped it into the toilet. What did you do that for? I screeched, staring at the white stick floating face down in the water. You could have warned me what it was, Kelsey. Maybe then I wouldn't have been surprised to find myself holding something you've peed on. Whatever. Did you see what it said before you tried to flush it? No, I didn't get that far. We both leaned forward to take a look at the piece of plastic floating in the bowl. I'm not reaching in there. Nudging her, I said, it's clean, I promise. Then you get it. If I get it, I might see what it says. Isn't that the point? If it was, then why would I ask you to come do it for me? I took it like 3 hours ago, and this is the closest I've come to it. I need you to do this for me. Please? Just reach in there and pull it out. With her arms crossed over her chest, Tatum stared at me like I was a recipe she was trying to figure out. What made you take it to begin with? I mean, why do you think you might be pregnant? For starters, I'm 3 days late. You've been late before, by no more than a day, which was because I marked the wrong date on the calendar. User error. This is different. I know for a fact I was supposed to start my period on Saturday, because it was exactly 1 week before your wedding. I remember being excited that I wouldn't have to worry about hiding a tampon in my bouquet. And I wouldn't have to worry about Aunt Flo interfering with getting some nuptial nookie. It's only Tuesday, Kels. Don't you think it's a little too early to be peeing on a stick? I pressed a hand against my chest and winced, and my boobs hurt. Bad. Sore breasts could mean you're about to start your period. If she didn't put her hand in my toilet and read the results on my pee stick, then I'd have to help her. I was the reigning bobbing for apples champion 3 years in a row when I was younger. Yeah? Does an impending menses also make you throw up at the smell of coffee? What about make you daydream about strawberry fields and salt shakers? I'm not entirely sure about that last one, but considering we're talking about you here, anything's possible. Is there a chance you ate something extremely out of date? I've always told you that those frozen meals aren't healthy. Are you not listening to the words that are coming out of my mouth? I have been craving strawberries with salt on them. Not just a hankering, but full-on murderous kind of craving. Being the best friend she was, she held up one finger and then left the room. I figured I'd give her to the count of 15 before going after her, but I knew in my heart I wouldn't have to. And when she came back, I realized what she'd gone to get. Tongs. I turned my back to her, not wanting to accidentally see the results. For whatever reason, I felt confident that I would take the news better if it came from Tatum. So I stood there and waited for her to either save the day or deliver my death sentence. At the sound of another splash, I glanced over my shoulder. The test was once again in the bowl, but this time, Tatum decided to close the lid, where she invited herself to take a seat as though the ordeal had exhausted her. The only reason I didn't give her a hard time was the look on her face. Part excitement, part sadness, a twinge of confusion, and a hint of intrigue. Her expression gave me nothing but more uncertainty. Will you just put me out of my misery already before I throw you off the damn toilet and dive in there myself? Tatum stood, placing her hands on my shoulders. Don't worry, Kels. You'll get your period. And then she walked out. An odd emotion ran over me, relief mostly, but there was a slight pang of sadness. I wouldn't get to experience this part of life with my best friend, and it took discovering that I didn't have what I didn't want to realize that maybe, just maybe, a small piece of me might have wanted it. I slowly made my way out of the room and found Tatum washing her hands in the kitchen sink. Feeling lost in a fog of warring thoughts, I fell into a seat at the table, the one I'd vacated before finding out my fate. You don't look happy. A spark glistened in her dark eyes as she dried her hands. I am. It's the best outcome, really. I never wanted kids, and the idea of getting knocked up by a stripper named Dr. Fill Me Up doesn't appeal to me. But I guess it's just one of those things that you don't realize you might want until you think you might already have it. Wait, are you saying the stripper you hired for my bachelorette party is the father of your child? If you were pregnant, I mean? I thought you said he wore a condom. He did. Well, as far as I know. But it couldn't have been anyone else. He's the only guy I've slept with in months. So what you're telling me is you aren't opposed to having a baby just as long as it's not with someone who dances in a G-string to jock jams? Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I just meant that, baby daddy aside, I wouldn't have jumped off a bridge had the test been positive. I might have sat on the ledge, leaned a little too far forward, contemplated the distance between the railing and the water below, but not jumped. For what it's worth, I think you'd be an amazing mom. I mean, your kid's first word would more than likely be something vulgar. He or she would think hamburger helper is gourmet, and there's a chance you'd be in a parent-teacher meeting at least once a week defending your child's overly dry sense of humor. But you'd be one hell of a mom. Thanks, Tater. Oddly enough, her sentiment meant the world to me, even if it would never be proven. Now I just hope my period waits a little longer to come so I don't have to deal with it at the wedding this weekend. I'm sure you'll be fine. If I had to guess, you'll get it in about 10 or so months, depending on whether you choose to breastfeed or not. My heart sank, my stomach clenched, and the world started to tilt. I had to have heard her wrong because she'd specifically told me that the test was negative. I would have assumed she was just messing with me, but Tatum was the world's worst liar, and now I wasn't sure what to believe. I'm sorry, but what? You told me I wasn't pregnant. No, I said you'll get your period, which you will, but not until you finish growing that tiny human currently residing in your womb. You're a monster. Who does that to someone? She sauntered to the chair next to me, a smile on her face. It was times like these I wished she didn't know me so well, because no matter what names I call her, she wouldn't believe for 1 second that I meant any of it. I just gave you what you never knew you wanted. You said so yourself. You're welcome. Think of it as my gift to you. Her arm must have been sore from patting her own back. And what's even better, we get to do this together. Just imagine. Our kids will be best friends, too. You're missing one giant issue. The baby's father doesn't change in any of this. Breathing became impossible, and the room started to spin like I'd gotten trapped in one of those gravitron rides at a carnival. Oh my God. I'm pregnant with a stripper's baby. If it's a girl, I'll have to name her Star or Bambi. She'll be in therapy from the time she takes her first breath. Calm down. You're freaking out for no reason. Maybe this fill your holes character only strips to pay for college. He's older than we are, at least in his 30s. I doubt he's in school, not to mention he's dumber than a box of rocks. For fuck's sake, what if stupidity is hereditary? My kid is totally going to be a window licker, won't it? She patted my hand the way my mom used to when trying to pacify me. I doubt that. You're one of the smartest people I've ever met. Worst case scenario, it'll be average. But even then, I don't think that'll happen. I can't see any child raised by you turning out to be anything less than amazing. I'm gonna have to tell him, aren't I? That's probably the right thing to do. Plus, giving him the opportunity to be involved keeps you from having to do this by yourself. If he doesn't want anything to do with it, at least you have me. And I'm sure your family would help out too. Somehow I hadn't even thought about my family until she'd mentioned them. They can't find out yet. Not until I'm ready to tell them. Got it? She latched onto my shoulders. Trust me, I get it. In case you forgot, they're not even aware of my situation, so you don't have to worry about me saying anything. That means Jason, too. You can't tell him either. I love you, Kels, but I'm not about to start off my marriage by lying to Jay. Oh, whatever. You lie to him all the time. The poor guy thinks the same bag of cheese puffs has been in the pantry for over a month, when we both know that's not the case. You eat an entire bag a day, and before he gets home, you make sure the same amount is left before putting it away. She gasped and opened her eyes wide, acting offended. It was obvious she wanted to lie and tell me I was wrong, but she wouldn't convince me of it. Finally, she dropped her shoulders and huffed. What's your point? If he were to ask me about it, I'd tell him the truth. Fine. Then do that with this, too. You're only allowed to confirm it if he specifically asks if I'm pregnant. And since you're a pro at keeping him from questioning things, you shouldn't have any problem hiding this until I'm ready to share it with people. You have nothing to worry about. That was laughable. You're either going to have to wipe that goofy grin off your face and stop staring at my stomach, or I'll have to avoid you until the cat's out of the bag. And considering your wedding's in 4 days and I'm the maid of honor, I suggest you get a handle on the ridiculous expression you're wearing right now. Otherwise, someone will have to stand next to you at the altar because it won't be me. I only meant half of that. I wouldn't miss her wedding for the world. Unfortunately, she knew that too. For the love of fried rice, Kels, can't you give me a minute to be excited? Tatum's brows pinched together, yet her eyes turned soft. An emotional moment hovered on the horizon, which left my stomach in knots. I was terrified when I found out I was pregnant. That was news to me. Why? Lots of reasons. Some were valid, such as feeling insecure that Jay would say it's too soon, that it wasn't part of the plan, and that he's not ready for our lives to change this much. But then there were the irrational fears, like being the only one of my friends with a kid, or not having anyone to share it with who can relate. It's a lonely feeling. So excuse me for being a little selfish and getting excited to have a partner in crime to go through this new and frightening experience with. I contemplated her words for a moment, and I couldn't seem to make sense of them. But you do have a partner in crime. His name's Jason, your fiancé, soon-to-be husband, my cousin. And unless you're keeping something from me, again, he's the father of your uncooked tater tot. Tatum waved me off with a flick of the wrist and a fluttering roll of her eyes. It's not the same. I wasn't insinuating that I would be alone or anything, but it's nice having someone to share things with. Someone who'll understand exactly what I'm going through. Jay can't possibly comprehend tender breasts, or how I can be ready for bed by 9, even though I had an hour nap after lunch. And no matter how hard he tries, he'll never get just how terrifying it is to think that a human being will come out of my vagina. I choked, causing Tatum to gently slap my back until I could breathe again. But even then, I couldn't do more than stare at her, blinking repeatedly as her words echoed in my head. What have I ever done to make you say such awful things to me? Her brow dipped with profound confusion. What did I say? I'm going to have a person crawl out of my hoo-ha and ruin any chances of ever getting laid again. It took Tatum a second to respond, opening and closing her mouth several times before finally speaking. While I've never actually seen anyone give birth, I feel quite confident that they don't crawl out. And again, I have no personal knowledge of this, but I've been told it goes back to normal size. You're not helping. I haven't even adjusted to the idea of a positive pregnancy test swimming in my toilet, let alone anything that comes after that. Yet you think it's a fantastic idea to point out how my vag will be stretched to accommodate a head. Are you planning on giving birth to an adult? I wasn't planning on giving birth to anything. Tatum quietly and slowly pushed to her feet and backed away, her hands in front of her as if telling me to stay put and calm down. I think you need some time to come to terms with this, and it's probably safest if I leave you alone while you do so. Just know that I'm only a phone call away. If you need me, I'll be here, but for now, maybe a little quiet time might be best. That way you can cry, freak out, curse the empty condom wrapper, or possibly hunt down Dr. Phil's so good, and cut off his balls without feeling like you have to hold anything back. I'd never held anything back around her before, but she made a valid point. There was no need to use her as my verbal diarrhea catcher, when my real issue wasn't even with her. Sure, she'd ended up being the bearer of bad news, although that was only because I'd made her drive all the way over here and then forced her to stick her hand in my toilet, all to give me the bad news in question. Whatever you do, she continued, her dark, contemplative eyes boring into mine. Make an appointment with an OBGYN as soon as possible. Don't make any plans or decisions, and don't freak out or get excited until you see the doctor. I nodded and offered as big of a smile as I could. Thanks, Tater. I'd probably be curled into a ball rocking myself in a corner right now if you weren't here, and I still wouldn't know what that damn stick said. I can stay if you need me. I shrugged, suddenly feeling like our roles had switched for the first time in our entire friendship. Nah, thanks, though. You're right. I need to process it, wrap my mind around the enormity of what it all means and how different my life will be from here on out. But I promise, once I get the major things sorted out and I no longer feel like I want to jump off a bridge, I'll give you a call. I love you, Tatum. Love you too. Once the door closed behind her, I headed into my room where I flopped onto the bed and stared at the wall. My eyes drifted to the clock on my nightstand to check the time. But before I read the bright blue digits, my sight fell onto the journal I'd found at my parents' house a couple of weeks ago. A strong urge inside me compelled me to pick it up, and within minutes, I had a pen in my hand and was scribbling any and every thought that came to mind. I didn't think about the words. I just purged myself of all emotion. Chapter 7, Kelsey. For some reason, doctors didn't consider a positive pregnancy test an urgent matter. Thankfully, a clinic in town could get me in soon, though they made me wait 2 days, which really wasn't anything special since I was told I wouldn't get more than a confirmation of pregnancy. Needless to say, it was the longest 2 days of my life. What exactly is considered paying for sex? I asked Tatum, without taking the clipboard from my face. There seems to be such a gray area around that. I'm pretty sure it's having sex in exchange for money. Not much gray there. So bartering isn't the same? She finally turned to look at me, even though I didn't return the favor. What are you talking about? You said in exchange for money. If Joe Blow says he'll give it to me real good if I buy him dinner first, is that paying for sex? Because technically I'd be paying, just not him. I'm not sure about that, though I'm positive you can find a loophole in just about anything. Tatum went back to the magazine in her hands, and I continued filling out pointless forms. They likely had a purpose, I just didn't see it. That's good to know. I'd hate to be accused of paying for sex if I buy a plane ticket for Tom Hardy to come here and... You have issues, she whispered, laughter filling her soft words. It's part of my charm, and one of the reasons you love me. Just hurry up and fill those forms out. I waved her off, though I complied and continued with the papers attached to the clipboard. This would be a lot faster if they didn't ask every question 84 times. I literally just answered how many times I've been pregnant. Then they ask how many babies I've delivered. I just told them I've never been pregnant before. Wouldn't that answer the next 17 questions about births? Tatum's index finger came into view, tapping the questions in front of me. See this? Where it says, if you answered yes, and you see this, where you answered no, and then her hand was gone. No other explanation followed. No need to be a smartass. You've already filled these forms out, so it's no surprise you already have the answers. Don't be a cheater and make it look like you know what you're doing just because you've been in my shoes before. I haven't been in your shoes, she said with laughter passing her lips. Never in my life have I been pregnant with a stripper's baby. A stripper I didn't even have a real name for. Speaking of which, what do you plan to put on the birth certificate? Dr. Fill Me Up? And if so, what's the last name? Oh, even better. What last name will your child have? Her last question made me stop and think. I hadn't made it that far in my mental freakout, and now that she'd posed it, I couldn't concentrate on anything else. Not the nurse who called my name or the cup they made me pee in. Not even the needle they stuck me with to draw blood. Everything was an utter blur. The doctor's words, nothing more than garble, until Tatum snapped me out of it on the way home. How exciting is this? Your due date is only a little over 2 weeks after mine. Our babies will be less than a month apart. Her elation was too much for this moment, and if I'd had any strength to summon sarcasm, I would have. I don't understand how any of this works. Tatum stared at the side of my head in silence for a moment. Then she said, well, when a man and a woman have sex, oh my God, Tatum, not about that. I'm confused how our due dates are so close if I'm not quite 3 weeks pregnant and you're 7. You didn't listen to a word he said, did you? I came to a stop at the traffic light and glared at her. He said a lot of words. It was hard to keep up. That's what I brought you for. So get on with it and explain it to me before I make you get out and walk home. I should really start coming up with more believable threats. Since you know the exact date you had sex, and it couldn't have possibly happened at any other time, they can pretty much pinpoint down to the day how far along you are, give or take a couple days. He's going by the fetal age, which will always be 2 weeks less than gestational age. Yeah, you're just confusing me more, Tater. I don't think I'm cut out for this whole mom gig. I can't even understand how old my baby is now. What'll happen when it's here? I'll forget its birthday or put the wrong number candle on the cake. Tatum huffed, but since I had to pay attention to the road, I couldn't do more than give her the middle finger, which she smacked away from her face. It's quite simple, really. Gestational age starts at the first day of your last period, meaning you're technically 2 weeks pregnant before you even conceive. Fetal age? Well, I think you can figure that out. For the love of modern technology, can't they just use one form of counting and leave it at that? I already have enough to be confused about as it is. I don't need anyone making it worse. She laid her hand on my arm and in a soothing voice said, make an appointment with an OB like I told you to and go from there. No need to freak yourself out over how far along you are. You already know that answer since you know when you conceived. Stop stressing. Yeah. Easy for her to say. She was marrying her baby's father in 2 days. I didn't even know the name of mine. My cell vibrated in my hand, and when I noticed the number on the screen, I snapped my fingers to get Tatum's attention. I have to take this. Give me 2 minutes. We were in our hotel room, getting ready to head downstairs for the rehearsal. But this was a matter I needed to take care of without any witnesses, especially my family. I'm sorry, Ms. Peterson, but there seems to be some sort of mix-up, the woman said on the other end of the line when I answered the call. After leaving the doctor's office yesterday with confirmation of my pregnancy, I had immediately gotten a hold of the service I'd used to hire the stripper for Tatum's bachelorette party. Unfortunately, the woman I'd spoken to had informed me that they didn't give out personal information about their entertainers. After I'd insisted it was urgent that I speak to him, she offered to pass along my name and number and let him be the one to reach out. I'd been expecting this call for 24 hours. I sat on the edge of the bed to keep my legs from giving out. I'm confused. What kind of mix-up are you talking about? It seems the performer that was scheduled for your party was double booked that night, and he never made it to yours. There must have been some oversight, since no one had noticed this earlier. Had I not called to get a hold of him, it still wouldn't have been noticed? My face heated with the rising anger inside. If this woman had been in front of me right now, I'd likely have had my hands around her neck. I realize this, and I apologize. We will credit the card you used when booking. That doesn't help me. Someone was there. A doctor? Much like I had ordered through you. He came, he danced, he took his clothes off. I need to locate him. I'm not really sure what I can do about that, ma'am. Whoever came to your event that night was not one of ours. I wish I could help more, but unfortunately, I don't have the answer you're looking for. I bit the corner of my thumbnail, careful not to ruin the manicure. What if he lied about where he was? Could that be possible? For safety reasons, we have location tracking on all our associates. This must be frustrating for you, but we've looked into each and every one of them, and none of our men were at Boots nightclub that night. I'm sorry. Whoever you encountered wasn't anyone from our review team. Is it possible someone else in your group had also ordered entertainment, and maybe that was the person you saw? No. The word barely squeaked out past the dread choking me. Well, I hope you find the person you're looking for. Is there a way I could see their locations, just for peace of mind? Unfortunately, no. We take the safety and security of our employees very seriously. Tatum sat next to me and rubbed my back while I leaned forward, my forehead resting in my palm. Thank you anyway. I appreciate you returning my call. I tapped the red icon and sighed, fighting off the urge to throw my phone across the room. I suddenly regretted the decision to leave my journal at home. This would have been a fantastic time to get my feelings out without worrying about the words I used. I trusted that Tatum would never judge me or make me feel bad about anything. But there was just something cathartic about writing on paper without thinking about anything. I could literally move from one thought to the next, mid-sentence, and just keep going. What was that about? Tatum's voice interrupted my need to journal. It seems the stripper never showed up to the party, so basically I have no idea who I slept with, or why he was even there, or how he even knew to come dressed as a doctor. I could be okay finding out I slept with someone who's even more of a stranger than I originally thought, but I'm having this man's kid. I don't have the faintest idea what his name is or how to find him, and the more I think about that, the more I realize I don't have any way to tell him about the baby or get medical information that I might need later on from my child. Family history, hereditary diseases, early onset male pattern baldness. I could have a son who starts going bald before he learns to drive, and I would have no way to know if it's normal. Tatum took my hands in hers, silencing my irrational rambling. There's no point in freaking out about things that haven't happened, or might possibly never happen, okay? I could only nod while taking a deep breath to calm down. The good thing about pregnancies is that you're given 9 months to prepare. A lot can happen in that time. It's March. The baby won't even be born until November. What do you think is going to happen, Tatum? I run into him on the street? And then what? Waddle my ass over to him, tap his shoulder, and explain that his offspring is cooking in my oven? Realization dawned on me, pulling a gasp from my chest before I could smack my hand over my mouth to keep it in. Oh my God. I'm going to be on Maury, aren't I? Kels, one thing at a time. Something about her voice, or maybe the way her hair framed her glowing face, lips painted a deep red, made me stop and think about where we were, about why we were here in the first place. And immediately I felt like crap. We were on the cusp of her perfect day. And there I was, casting a gray cloud over my best friend's weekend. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be putting this on your plate right now. I'll be okay once I splash some cold water on my face. I just need 30 seconds to pull myself together, and then I'll be ready to head downstairs. I slipped off the bed and headed to the small bathroom. Take your time. After wiping a tissue beneath my eyes and pulling myself together enough to prevent others from suspecting anything, I was ready to get this over with. I followed Tatum into the hallway and headed for the elevators, but before we got there, she stopped at Jason's room. I'll meet you down there, she winked as she tapped her knuckles on the door. Are you seriously about to have a quickie? Absolutely not. I rolled my eyes and stepped away. You're a shit liar, Tater. The door opened, and she yelped playfully. Luckily, I didn't have to witness that. I just continued toward the end of the hall to head downstairs. I sent a quick text to my sister to see if she was already there, and then turned the corner to the elevators. Glancing up from my phone, I noticed a well-dressed man standing in front of the button. His light hair was cut short, shaped nicely, which gave his angular jaw a sexiness that nearly made me moan out loud. He had his attention on a device in his hand, but, likely hearing me, he turned, locking me in the trap of his familiar gaze. His deep green stare reminded me of a forest, and it left me with more questions than answers. Intrigue, curiosity that tugged at my heart and circled my throat, threatening to both give me life and take it away simultaneously. It was a knife in my chest and a pat on my back all at once. "Oh, what are you doing here?" I stepped closer, then craned my neck to check the hallway behind me. A hesitant smirk danced to one side of his delicious mouth, a mouth I hadn't gone one night without dreaming of, and then he tugged on his necktie, drawing my attention to the same strip of silk that had opened my world to things I never would have guessed I liked. "Hey." One word. That was all he offered. It was all it took to make me want to climb him like a tree. "Why are you here?" I asked again. He blinked up at the panel above the mirrored doors, likely checking how long he had to answer my question by how many floors stood between the cart and us. Either that or he was desperate to get away from me. "Just waiting on an elevator to take me downstairs." "Oh, did you have a private party tonight?" He cleared his throat, once again tugging on his tie. "Something like that." "What are you supposed to be? Where's your costume?" "It's not that kind of party." He shifted on his feet before slowly dragging his gaze up my body. "Listen, we should probably talk." That was enough to snap me out of my daze, reminding me that I stood in front of the unnamed stripper, the one I'd been convinced I'd never find, the one who'd accidentally fathered the child I'd never thought I wanted until yesterday. "Yeah, we definitely need to talk." "All right, you first." It was my turn to check the numbers, noting that someone must have pulled some strings to give us more time to have this conversation. "So, I know we said we wouldn't see each other again, but that was before—" "Oh, look." Tatum sidled up next to me, weaving her arm through mine at the same time Jason came around the side, moving to stand next to my unborn child's father. "You're still here." That was fast. I scrunched my nose, unsure what they could have possibly done in the 10 seconds they were in the room. She rolled her eyes, a smile plastered on her face. "What can I say? He knows my buttons." "That's gross. I never want to hear such filth come out of your mouth again." I turned away from my best friend, setting my sights on the man in front of me. It wasn't lost on me that he looked even sexier when my brain wasn't swimming in tequila, which was a dangerous thought to have, what with how close he stood. In a hotel that had lots of beds. Yet my lack of attention didn't stop Tatum from speaking. "I take it you two met?" His pupils constricted, the green darkening as he kept his eyes on mine. Only then did I contemplate Tatum's question, wondering why he'd have any type of reaction to it. But before I could ask anything, or even look away from his demanding gaze, he said, "Yeah, we've met." "Good. That saves us the introductions." The elevator door chose that second to open, but I couldn't move, even as Tatum tried to drag me by the arm. The only thing that got my feet to move was what she said next. "Kels, Aaron, come on. We have a wedding to rehearse." Aaron. Jason's friend. The guy who'd be living with me for a few months? The stripper? The father of my child. One and the same. There was just no way. This was real life.
Chapter 8. Aaron. Nothing ever turned out the way I planned. Nothing. I tried to pull Kelsey aside a few times at the rehearsal as well as at the dinner afterward, yet it seemed there was one interruption after another. Her family was the biggest issue, specifically her mother, who did nothing but stick her phone in everyone's face for a picture. And when it was over, Kelsey had taken Tatum back to their room at the hotel, leaving me once again unable to have a conversation with her. Obviously, I hadn't been able to see her before the ceremony as she'd spent the entire time with Tatum, and I'd been with Jason. The reception was the first chance I had to speak to her, other than the 60 seconds up and down the aisle, which wasn't the place to discuss where I'd live in a week. But even then, she made it impossible to be near her. That was, until she excused herself from dinner and ran out. I didn't bother following her into the women's bathroom or even knocking. Instead, I waited just outside the door for her to finish whatever the hell she was doing in there. And several long minutes later, she rewarded me with her presence. Glassy eyes, runny nose, and all. Everything all right? I held her wrists to keep her from running off again. Yeah, she sniffled, which wasn't typically a sign of being all right. I didn't realize until too late that they gave me veal. Still, I didn't understand. Is that not what you ordered? Honestly, I don't remember what I marked on the card. I think I just circled something because I was tired of Tatum complaining that mine was the only one they were waiting on. She shrugged, pulling her hands from my grip. I take it you don't like veal? I don't like eating baby anything. She covered her pale lips with her fingers while staring at the center of my chest. It seemed like she might have been on the verge of vomiting, possibly again. Can we not talk about it? Sorry. I got the vegetarian dish if you want to swap. Disgusted eyes met mine. You want to eat the baby cow? What the No! I shook my head and fought to keep my laughter under wraps. I just meant that if you want, you can have my plate. I barely touched it. Why? I wasn't sure how to respond, so I did the best I could with the vague question she posed. Because you don't like what you have? I'm not going to make you starve. That would be rude of me. Finally, the tiniest smile danced on her lips. No, I meant, why did you barely touch your plate? I glanced to the side and noticed a bench against the wall. Gently taking her hand, I nodded toward it and led her a few feet to take a seat. Let's talk. Things have been hectic and we haven't really had a chance to say anything to one another. About why you don't want your food? If it's that serious, I don't want it either. I couldn't withhold my amusement anymore. No, not about that. About us. What happened a few weeks ago. What we have ahead of us. Listen, I appreciate the fact that you want to take a walk down memory lane, but I don't really think our best friend's wedding is the place to do that. Do you? Smirking, I said. I didn't plan on going over the details, if that's what you're worried about. I just need to make sure you're still good with me moving in next weekend. I held up a hand to keep her from interrupting before I had a chance to get out everything I needed to say. If you're not, I understand. Trust me. But I'd rather you tell me now than wait until I'm all moved in. Tatum said you didn't have anywhere else to go. That sounded like something Tatum would say, especially if her motive was to guilt Kelsey into doing what she wanted. She was a smart girl. Plus, how are you going to find something else in a week? Don't worry about that. It's not your burden to take on, it's mine. I'm not going to be responsible for someone being homeless, Aaron. My back met with the wall behind me as I expelled a breath I hadn't realized I'd held in. It came out like a huff, though she likely assumed it to be a sigh. And with my sight glued to the ceiling, I grumbled, I won't be homeless. Then where will you go? Tatum said you're being evicted. That was enough to pull a barking laugh from my chest. Evicted? Wow, that was mighty nice of her. No, the house I was living in sold, so I had 4 weeks to find somewhere to go. Then why haven't you found a place if you were given so much time? Didn't the owners tell you that they were putting the house up for sale? It appeared she hadn't been told anything about my situation. Tatum could have at least given her some of the facts. I knew they were putting the house on the market. What I didn't expect was for it to be in escrow 3 days later. As for the 4 weeks I was given to move out, I've been looking, but it's hard when I only need something temporarily. And assuming Tatum hadn't told her any of this either, I carried on. I want to buy a house, so renting something for the next 12 months would be pointless. Her eyes lit up, excitement coloring her cheeks until she no longer looked like she'd just finished hugging a toilet in a fancy dress. I have lots of connections in the real estate business. I stage a lot of their homes for open houses. Yeah, Jason told me. That's why he thought you could help me out. Before she could do or say anything, we were interrupted by a blonde, the very same one from the bachelorette party, the one who couldn't stop hopping and clapping. Have we met before? She pointed at me and stared with squinted eyes. I don't think so. I turned to Kelsey for help. He's Jason's best friend. You might have seen him around Tatum. Maybe. She took one step and then stopped. Snapping her fingers, she swung her wide eyes back to me, flickering them between the two of us. I remember where I've seen you. You're the stripper from Boots. Heat blanketed my face. I think you're mistaken. I'm not a stripper. Never thought those words would ever come out of my mouth. You sure? Because I never forget a face. Trust me, Rebecca. Kelsey came to my defense. Thank God. That wasn't him. I think I would know more than you. At least that was enough to appease the bouncing blonde. Yet instead of leaving, she cocked her head to one side and narrowed her gaze. After the short inspection, she gave a half shrug. You're right, although there's definitely a similarity there. If you hit the gym more, I'd bet you'd look just like Dr. Fill Me Up. She paused with a finger pressed to her lips. Well, now that I look again, you might be a couple of years younger, too. He had a sense of wisdom to him. Thanks? I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be a compliment, but it didn't feel like one. Then again, I'd take any reason for her to believe that I wasn't the stripper from the party and leave. Rebecca, whoever she was or wherever she came from, smiled and waved me off. You're welcome. And then she was gone. That's Rebecca, Kelsey muttered under her breath with a thumb hitched in her direction. She's like a stray puppy. Never leaves you alone, but you just can't find it in yourself to shoo her away because she's disgustingly nice. Thanks for the help with that. The last thing I need is for people to know anything about that night. Well, more than they already knew. Jason had heard his fair share, and if he ever discovered that it had been his cousin, I'd be a dead man. Jason wasn't overly protective of Kelsey, but there was some unwritten code about sleeping with a family member of one of your friends. The fact that he'd heard far too much about that night would only add gasoline to the flame. Yeah, about that night. Kelsey took a deep breath and ran her palms over her silk-covered thighs. She seemed as nervous as I felt. The last thing I wanted was for her to assume I wanted more. Well, I did, but that wasn't the point. We couldn't have more, and I was fully aware of that, not to mention I didn't care to hear her tell me what a mistake it was, or how much she regretted our time together. So, I did the only thing I could think of. Pretended like it didn't matter much to me either. I cleared my throat and prepared for the biggest performance of my life. It's okay. You don't have to explain anything. In fact, it might be easier if we just pretend it never happened. That way, it won't cause a problem while we're living together. If you're still cool with me moving in, that is. I wish I could pretend it never happened, but I know what you mean. I leaned toward her and lowered my voice to add. It was fucking amazing. Unforgettable. The smell of her hair made me pull away. Well, that, and I didn't want anyone to see us sharing a secret. I couldn't handle more assumptions that weren't accurate. But if you do allow me to stay with you, it'd be in our best interest to act like nothing's happened between us. There was a reason we agreed to remain anonymous with each other. Agreed. And you're right, nothing can ever happen again. Oddly enough, she appeared defeated, deflated. Something dragged her down. just mean, there you two are. Tatum came out of the ballroom, hands on her hips. She looked like an angel in her white dress, dark hair pinned to her head with curls escaping near her face. Jason truly was a lucky man to spend the rest of his life with her. You ran off and then never came back. I'm not going in there until the baby cow is removed from the table, Kelsey said with her arms crossed, a sudden defiance consuming her. Why'd you leave? Tatum pinned me with a questioning glare. I came to check on her after she ran off. Now we're discussing the move. Recognition shone bright in her dark, wide eyes. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot you two weren't able to get together last week. Well, is this going to take much longer? We're about to cut the cake, and then it's the bouquet toss, which you better catch, Kels. I'm not coming within 10 feet of that shit. You might as well hand it to someone else. I'm sure Carrie wouldn't mind taking it from you. Any reason to get Victor to propose, and she's on it like freezer burn on chicken. Laughter scratched at the back of my throat. I had no idea whom she spoke of, but between the bouquet and the analogy, I almost couldn't contain it. Tatum rolled her eyes, a smile playing on her crimson lips. How many times do I have to explain this, Kels? Only your chicken has freezer burn. It's not a normal thing. Either way, I don't want the stupid flowers, but I would like some cake. She glanced at me. Can we finish this conversation another time? I grabbed her hand to prevent her from getting up and following Tatum back into the ballroom. We're cool, right? Yeah, we're cool. She seemed irritated or upset, so I added, with living together, I mean. I didn't want her to misunderstand why I'd asked that. Yeah. She might have nodded and given me an answer, yet her eyes didn't seem to match. She wasn't aggravated or annoyed. If anything, she was hesitant, as if she had something else to say but couldn't get the words out. After a moment of deliberating with herself, she met my stare and added, Maybe we can get together this week and discuss the rules and whatnot. Sounds good. At least I didn't have to keep stressing that she would pull the rug out from beneath me, forcing me to find somewhere else to live in the next 7 days. The bouquet hung loosely at Kelsey's side as she made her way down the hall, and all I could think about was her terrified expression when it landed in her arms, no one bothering to fight her for it. And what had made it even better was the garter I'd managed to snag, only to slide it up her leg to her thigh. I'd figured it'd be the last time I got to touch her, and I'd refused to pass it up. It still put a smile on my face. My hotel room was close to hers, so I decided that making sure she got to her room in one piece would be the gentlemanly thing to do. I might or might not have had a few drinks at the reception, making me cling to any ounce of hope I could find that she'd had just as much and would invite me in. So I was thinking, I said as I followed one step behind Kelsey. We could totally finish our conversation now. That way we won't have to schedule something next week. She stopped at her room and turned to face me with her back against the door. Hope danced in her eyes, though a small, cunning grin lined her lips. You're more than welcome to come in. To talk. We're not having sex. Well, that was like a bucket of cold water in my lap. I wasn't looking to have sex with you again. We've already talked about that. Lies. All lies. Right. Skepticism brightened the green rims around her irises. Fine then. Come on. And with that, she turned, stuck her keycard into the slot, and then opened the door, holding it for me to slip in behind her. I took a seat on the edge of the bed while she moved into the bathroom, likely to change. But that didn't stop me from beginning the conversation, even if she had to respond through a wall. Provided I find something quickly, I shouldn't be there longer than a couple months. But like I told Jason, I'm not looking for a free place to stay. Good, because I didn't offer a free room. She tossed her dress through the door and pulled it almost shut again. I guess we should probably discuss the rent aspect of it, huh? Just seeing the peach-colored silk sprawled on the floor filled my mind with dirty thoughts I didn't have any right to have. Yeah. I cleared my throat, eradicating the desire that had flooded my voice. That's probably a good idea. When Tatum lived with me, she paid half the rent and nothing more, so I figured it'd only be fair if I did the same for you. What do you mean, and nothing more? It's easier to have you pay half the rent rather than split all the other bills. I'd pay the same amount for cable whether you were there or not, and the utilities don't come until the following month. Unless you take incredibly long showers, leave the sink running all morning while you get ready for work, or turn on every light in the place during the day, it's just easier to call those things a wash. Fair enough. What about food? I don't mind if you eat what's there, just as long as you contribute and replace it if you take the last of something. Same with the laundry detergent and cleaning products. And I ask that you pick up after yourself in the common area. What you do in your room is your business, providing it doesn't destroy anything that I'll have to fix or replace myself. You won't have to worry about that. A smile broke free and created a slow burn in my cheeks. For whatever reason, I'd expected her list of demands to be something more than this. Although she did seem a little nervous, and we weren't done listing the rules, so there could have still been more coming. Also, my apartment is fully furnished, so you'll only need to bring your clothes and personal effects and whatnot. If you have furniture, you might want to get a storage unit for the meantime, until you get your own place. What about the room I'm taking? Is there furniture in there too? Yes, it used to be Tatum's. She didn't need it when she moved in with Jason. All the sheets and blankets are clean, and the mattress is nearly new. There's one dresser in that room, but it should be big enough for you. She scanned my body with her eyes, as if somehow determining how many clothes I had. If not, the closet is completely empty. That's perfect, because I planned to leave my bedroom set behind when I move. It's old. I've had it since I was, 12. And no one wants to buy their first home and then fill it with ancient furniture. A whispered laugh blew past her smiling lips, but when she glanced up from her lap and met my eyes, she paused. Then she quickly shook off whatever thought had come to her and continued. One last thing. I would appreciate it if you don't have guests over. I'm just not comfortable. No need to elaborate. I get it. That, at least, saved me from having to explain that I didn't have many friends. But just so there's no confusion, will Jason be exempt from that rule? She huffed to herself, slightly rolling her eyes. Obviously. I guess we're all squared away then. I didn't want to leave, praying something else would come up that would keep me here, even if we only talked. You said you could help me find a house. Is that offer still on the table? Her gaze softened, the momentary irritation vanishing as though it were nothing more than a breeze. Yeah, I can do that. I just need to know what you're looking for, and I can ask around. I have connections with quite a few realtors, as well as builders, in case you're interested in starting from scratch. That wasn't something I'd given much thought to, considering I was on a restricted time frame. I'd had a hard enough time finding a place to stay for a couple of months. Imposing on someone's space for longer than that while I had a house built would have been impossible. However, thinking about perhaps staying with Kelsey while that happened seemed like an ideal opportunity. But you don't need to let me know now, she continued, breaking me out of my thoughts. Just make me a list before next weekend and I'll get a few options ready to look at. Thanks, Kelsey. You have no idea how much I appreciate this. When I realized who you were, I have to admit, I was worried you'd change your mind. Out of curiosity, when did you realize who I am? I scratched my chin, even though I didn't have an itch. It likely made me look guilty, but if I was being honest, I'd stopped caring what things looked like long ago. People made up their own minds regardless of how I acted or what I did. Last Friday, after Jason told me that you said I could move in. But how? How'd you figure it out? Because I had no clue until last night at the elevators. The awareness in her eyes when Tatum had said my name was something I'd never forget. My assistant looked you up on Facebook. She nodded. focusing on the pillow in her lap while biting the inside of her cheek. Any reason why you didn't say anything when you found out? What did you expect me to do, Kelsey? Retrace my steps to your apartment and knock on your door, say, "Hey, I know you said I can move in, but you might want to reconsider since I'm the guy who said I love you right before he came?" Yeah, no. Nothing was more embarrassing than being so wrapped up in the fantasy we'd built that I had confessed my undying love to her, even without knowing her name. I just hoped she hadn't taken that to heart. She dipped her head even more, tucking her chin to her chest to hide the naughty grin and rosy cheeks. When she finally seemed to have control over her reaction, she glanced up and asked, "Had I recanted my offer? Where would you have gone?" I shrugged, truly unable to give her much of an answer. "I'm not sure. I'd like to believe that Jason and Tatum wouldn't let me live out of my car and would offer one of their spare rooms, but I'm not sure, since that's never come up." Yeah, I don't know how true that is. I'm sure they would have done all they could to help you out, but moving you in? I doubt that would have been much of an option. You mean because she's pregnant? Kelsey's eyes widened, fear constricting her pupils while she stared daggers at me. "Did Jason tell you?" "Tatum said no one knew. They haven't even said anything to their families yet. Then again, she told me, so I guess it'd only be fair if he talked to you about it." "No." I laughed, placed my hand on her bare knee, and was suddenly sidetracked by the heat burning into my palm. But I quickly managed to lock that down and continue with our conversation. "That night, you told me that you dressed as the bride-to-be because your friend just found out she was pregnant and was too sick to come out. Once I realized it was you, I figured Tatum was the friend in question and put two and two together." "Shit. Have you said anything to them?" "Honestly, between work and the wedding, as well as freaking out about seeing you, I haven't thought much of it. I assumed he'd tell me when he was ready, and if he hadn't said anything yet, he had a good reason." That could have ended very badly. The teeniest smile curled the corners of her lips before dropping. "Seriously, though, if I'd changed my mind about letting you stay with me, would you really have no other place to go but your car?" Shifting on the edge of the mattress to face her, I pulled one knee up and shrugged. "Technically, I could find something else. Maybe a motel, my office, moving between friends' couches. But I thought you had a lot of friends. At least, that's how my cousin made it sound." This was the downside of living a double life, of not correcting others when they assumed things about you. "I know a lot of people. Meet up with most of them when I go out. But that doesn't make them viable options to live with." "Why not?" "You don't know me, but you're moving into my place. How would living with an acquaintance be any different than moving in with a stranger?" "It's just not the same. End of story." I refused to go into the details of why I couldn't move in with Cheryl or any of the other women I'd attempted and failed to date. But to answer your question, no. If you changed your mind, I wouldn't have to sleep in my car. I'd be able to find somewhere to stay, just as long as you don't wait until the last second to tell me I can't move in with you." "Nah, I wouldn't do that. I already told you that you can stay in Tatum's old room. It'd be a bitch move if I took that back now. No matter how I feel about it." I felt like shit. It was clear she didn't want me there and had only kept her word out of a sense of honor. On the other hand, if I released her of this self-imposed obligation, then I'd be screwing myself over. As much as I wanted to do the right thing, I couldn't risk not having a place to live for the next few months. And oddly enough, my decision not to give her an out had nothing to do with wanting a repeat performance from a few weeks ago. "I just don't understand why you didn't get more of a notice from the owners of the house you were staying in. Isn't that against the law or something?" I dropped my attention to the bedspread and began to pick at an errant thread. "It might be, but who knows? I don't think my situation would fall under those rules." "Why not?" "Because I lived with my parents." She was silent for a moment. and it almost made me glance up to survey her expression. But when she started to laugh, I knew I didn't want to see the look on her face. It would be no different than everyone else's when they found out. Wait! She slowed the amusement rolling through her long enough to catch her breath. How old are you? Here we go again. I met her stare, giving her exactly what she wanted to hear. I knew this because it was what everyone wanted, what they expected. There was no reason to give them anything else. It would only ruin their entertainment.